Chapter 427. This guy copied Pietro's super speed. He won't be able to move normally for half an hour. Check his injuries, don't let him die. After you're done, find a room and lock him up. After bringing back the immobile Quicksilver, Rog told Hinata. At this time, on another dissection table in the laboratory, the medical robot was helping the fake Daisy with the final treatment. She copied Daisy's superpower. Don't forget to prepare a room for her. Rog glanced at the fake Daisy on the autopsy table, who had turned back into a scroll, and continued. Yes, sir. Hinata's gentle voice sounded out of thin air in the laboratory. After instructing Hinata, Rog once again used the flying Thor and returned to the headquarters. Both the fake Daisy and the fake Quicksilver were in his hands, only the fake Hulk was left. When he returned to the headquarters of the Avengers, the first thing he saw was his last target, the fake Hulk that was transformed from a super Skrull. He was being beaten up by the real Hulk who had opened the 8 inner hidden gates. Although he didn't know how a super Skrull with a body similar to an ordinary person became a huge Hulk. However, after seeing the fight between the real Hulk and the fake Hulk, he had to admit that the fake Hulk perfectly copied some of Hulk's abilities. Resistant to beatings. Especially resistant to beatings. Even in the face of the real Hulk who had opened the Hashimantanku, the fake Hulk still showed an extremely tenacious ability to resist all of Hulk's attacks. While Rog was appreciating the violent aesthetic scene of the real Hulk beating the fake Hulk, Tawny and the others, who had evacuated all the unrelated personnel and changed their equipment, finally joined the battle. Similar to Konoha's people, Tawny and the others first chose their fake versions. For a while, the grassland of the Avengers became lively. 5 or 6 Iron Man in Iron Man armor were fighting in the air, and 3 or 4 identical Captain America were fighting with each other. The graceful Black Widows were fighting in a group, and the Hawkeye were shooting arrows at each other. The War Machine Colonel Rog, Falcon Sam, Ant-Man Scott, and the others were also fighting fiercely with their knockoff versions. The only one who looked more relaxed was Illusion. He didn't know if it was too difficult to imitate Illusion, or for some other reason. Among these heroes, Rog only saw one fake Illusion. With the addition of the Avengers, the fake heroes, who didn't have much advantage, suddenly became more precarious. After a while, Roger, who has activated his Sharingan, began to be unable to distinguish their true identities. But even so, he didn't intend to switch back to be a Kugan. The only target he needed to deal with now was the fake Hulk, who was fighting with the real Hulk. As for the other knockoff heroes, they could be dealt with by the real deal. Flying Thor. After sensing the Flying Thor technique on Hulk, Rog directly flashed in front of him and joined forces with him to attack this fake version of Hulk. Taijutsu, monstrous strength. After further development of the Sage body, Rog rarely took the initiative to use monstrous strength. Even when fighting with Ronin on Saga planet, he didn't deliberately open Taijutsu, monstrous strength. However, at this time, in order to send this fake version of Hulk flying as soon as possible, he directly used monstrous strength. Even one-on-one with the real Hulk who opened the first gate, this fake version of Hulk couldn't gain the upper hand. When Rog also joined the battle, this fake version of Hulk didn't even have a chance to fight back and could only be beaten passively. Although Hulk didn't know why Rog suddenly joined the battle, he had no opinion on Rog's approach. Not only that, he even somewhat liked the feeling of fighting together with Rog. Under the joint attack of Hulk and Rog, this fake version of Hulk only lasted for less than 5 seconds before he was completely sent flying. Just when Hulk was about to chase after him, Rog suddenly stopped him. "Leave him to me, you go deal with the rest." After speaking, Rog didn't wait for Hulk's reply and used Lightning Body Blink to chase after him. Seeing Rog's figure suddenly disappear, Hulk, who was emitting a green glow, stopped in place and thought for a few seconds before taking large strides towards the other Hulks. The situation had developed to this point, the Skrull people had completely lost the initiative in the battle. Right now, not to mention rescuing the imprisoned Skrull people, whether they could even leave this place alive was a problem. Thinking of this fake version of Hulk transformed from a super Skrull person looked at Rog in front of him with hatred. If it wasn't for Rog, their disguise plan wouldn't have been seen through so quickly. If it wasn't for Rog, their rescue plan wouldn't have ended up in such a situation. All of this was caused by the man in front of him. If it wasn't for him, the Skrull people could definitely turn Earth into their new home planet. In this fake version of Hulk's view, the reason why they couldn't occupy Earth was all Rog's fault. It had to be said that the Skrull people who had already started a space civilization somewhat underestimated Earth. In terms of civilization development, Earth was indeed inferior to those planets that had started a space civilization. However, Earth was truly a monster house. The number of hidden monsters on Earth was more than any other planet in the universe. Even if it wasn't for Rog, their plan to invade Earth would absolutely not succeed. However, at this time, this fake version of Hulk obviously wouldn't think so much. In his mind, there was only one thought, and that was to completely kill Rog. He knew that Rog was very strong, but he wasn't weak either. He was a rare super Skrull among the Skrull people. He was a super Skrull who could perfectly imitate Hulk. He was a super Skrull who survived the full pursuit of the Carey Empire. Just as this fake version of Hulk was about to burst into anger and wanted to prove his strength to Rog, he saw a huge energy ball with a diameter of several meters, crazily rotating. Super Jade Rasengan. Rog didn't intend to explain anything to this fake version of Hulk. The only thing he wanted to do now was to get this rare super Skrull person to Konoha's laboratory as soon as possible, and then carefully study their secrets. Boom! This fake version of Hulk didn't have time to stand up. The Rasengan in Rog's hand fiercely smashed into his body. Then, a huge explosion similar to the explosion of an intercontinental missile occurred. Chapter 428. The huge explosion resounded throughout the headquarters of the Avengers, immediately attracting everyone's attention. When the people of Konoha and the Avengers saw that the explosion was caused by Rog, they chose to ignore it. For Rog, making this kind of shocking explosion was a basic operation, nothing to make a fuss about. But for the Skrulls, Rog's attack was something they couldn't imagine. They couldn't understand how Rog, an Earthling, could have such powerful strength. This kind of strength was even stronger than Ronin, the one who brought indelible painful memories to their race. It has to be said that the intelligence of these Skrulls was not just a little bit behind. In their hearts, Luo Nan, the demon-like manipulator, was defeated by Luo Gu. Moreover, it was twice. This once again proved how important it was to understand one's opponent in advance before carrying out certain secret plans that could not be divulged to outsiders. The Okodama Rasengan smashed into the body of the knockoff Hulk. Not only did it completely dispel his thoughts of standing up, but it also made him more intimate with the ground. The green grass had disappeared, and in its place was a large hole with a diameter of nearly 10 meters. The knockoff Hulk, who tried to kill Rog, was located in the center of the hole. Although the power of the Okodama Rasengan was very strong, it wasn't enough to kill this super Skrull who transformed into Hulk. However, Rog didn't expect this Okodama Rasengan to be able to deal with this knockoff Hulk. For him, this kind of thing was as simple as breathing. Although casting the Okodama Rasengan required a lot of chakra, right now, he didn't lack chakra. When he just crossed over to this world, he yearned for the existence of chakra. And now, with the Rokubi's chakra and the Yonkyubi, he finally felt a little bit of chakra. The reason why Hashirama was able to pacify the chaotic world, in addition to his unreasonable sage body and Mokuton, more importantly, he had chakra in the truest sense. It was also because of this amazing amount of chakra that Hashirama's could catch the Kyubi's Bijidama with his bare hands. It was also because he had Chattanooga that he could use the heaven-destroying and earth-exterminating immortal technique, would release, True Thousand Hands, Buddha on top. Although Rog has also developed the sage body to a certain extent, there is still a big gap between him and Hashirama's peak state. If he develops his sage body to the limit, coupled with the complete Kyubi, he is confident that he can display a more powerful attack than Hashirama at his peak. However, this beautiful future was still a little far away from him. Putting these fantasies that he couldn't do for the time being, Rog once again displayed the Super Jade Rasengan. There was nothing that the Rasengan couldn't solve, and if there was, then he would use another one. Now, Rog intended to once again implement this truth that had been proven countless times. Before the knockoff Hulk, who was lying in the center of the big pit, could get up, the second super jade Rasengan had already reached his body. Then, another huge explosion resounded throughout the headquarters of the Avengers. Boom! This time, Rog didn't wait for the flying dust to fall to the ground. His right hand once again condensed the super jade Rasengan. Then, history repeated itself. Boom! After continuously smashing 5 super jade Rasengan on the unlucky knockoff, Hulk, Rog finally stopped the idea of making Rasengan and sensed the guy's vital signs. His vitality was not very stable, and his strength was very low. However, he was still alive. Since he didn't die, it didn't affect his next plan. Under the gaze of the scrolls, Rog slowly walked into the big pit that had expanded to more than 20 meters in diameter. Flying Thor. Without any hesitation, Rog brought the unconscious Hulk, who had changed back to his original appearance, back to the laboratory of Konoha's headquarters. This guy replicated Hulk's ability, the others are the same as before. After instructing Hinata, Rog's figure disappeared again. Although the 3 super scrolls were in his hands, the battle in the headquarters wasn't over yet. Although he didn't have much of a plan to fight, as the 4th Hokage of Konoha, he couldn't abandon the members of Konoha who were fighting. This was his duty as the leader of Konoha. When Rog returned to the headquarters of the Avengers, the scrolls who were in the midst of battle couldn't help but reveal looks of fear. The 3 strongest super scrolls among them had all been defeated by Logue, and none of them had been able to hold on for long. From the beginning of the battle to the present, a total of 5 minutes have passed. However, in this short span of 5 minutes, they had lost their 3 most powerful combatants. This kind of thing, not to mention the scrolls who were at a disadvantage, even if it happened to Konoha and the Avengers who had the advantage, it would still have a psychological impact on Konoha and the Avengers. The situation is over. Although these scrolls were still trying to resist the attack of Konoha and the Avengers. However, everyone present, including the onlookers on the other end of the television, could easily see this. After returning to the headquarters, Rog didn't join the battle again. As long as he stood there, it was enough to affect the scrolls. In addition to Roger, Hulk also closed the 8 inner hidden gates and silently came to Roger's side after dealing with the several counterfeit versions that had been passed off as his own. Hulk didn't have the ability to distinguish between scrolls, except for his own super scrolls. He couldn't recognize which one was authentic and which one was fake. In order to avoid accidentally injuring the people on his side, he also directly withdrew from the battle. Rog and Hulk's withdrawal didn't have much impact on the battle. It didn't take long for these super scrolls who were still stubbornly resisting to have plans to retreat. However, even if they want to leave now, it's too late. Moreover, Rog won't give them a chance to leave. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Rog summoned 4 shadow clones that looked exactly like him. Then, these 4 shadow clones rushed to the east, west, north, and south directions. For Violet Flame Formation. When these 4 shadow clones arrived at the predetermined location, they simultaneously cast the 4 Violet Flame Formation. A purple square-shaped barrier rose into the sky, covering the entire headquarters. The 4 Violet Flame Formation is one of the small results of Rog's research in the past 6 months in Konoha's hidden village. He didn't exchange the 4 Violet Flame Formation from the system, but he developed this ninjutsu on his own. After their final counterattack failed, the morale of the Sikru people plummeted, and the fighting strength they displayed also plummeted. It didn't take long for the Skrull soldiers to be defeated. At this time, the obvious gap between Konoha and the Fu once again appeared on the battlefield. All the Skrulls who transformed into Konoha's people, without exception, died. Even if they chose to surrender in the end, they still couldn't avoid the fate of death. But the Avengers were different. Apart from the Skrulls who died on the spot, those who chose to surrender all survived. As long as they put down their weapons and change back to their original appearance, the people of the Avengers will not attack them again, nor will they kill them inhumanely like Konoha. Rog didn't say anything about Daisy and the others' actions. To a certain extent, he even approved of what Daisy and the others had done. To cut the weeds, one must dig up the roots. Although Rog did not openly promote this in Konoha, the people of Konoha understood the essence of it very well. After the end of the battle, he directly removed the 4 shadow clones. Without the continuous supply of chakra from the shadow clones, the 4 purple flame formation quickly dissipated in the air. Rog didn't intend to intervene in the matter of cleaning the battlefield. This is the headquarters of the Avengers, it's not his turn to deal with it. As for the Skrulls who were spared by the Avengers, he wasn't particularly worried about their fate. While the Avengers dealt with the surrendered Skrulls, he directly opened the portal back to Konoha's headquarters. When all the people of Konoha passed through the portal, Rog, who was walking at the back, turned to Tani and said, "See you in 3 days." After that, he directly passed through the portal and closed it. Hearing Rog's last words, Tani's face showed a wry smile. 3 days later, the voting will be closed. With Tani's understanding of Rog, if he said this sentence, it means that he knows what the voting results will be in 3 days. You should all take a break for a few days, there shouldn't be anything special to deal with, enjoy your vacation. After saying that, Rog returned to his office with the Flying Thunder God and asked Hinata to inform Dr. Connors to come to his office. In Konoha, only Dr. Connors has enough ability to study the secret of the Super Skrulls. Therefore, this task belongs to none other than him. Although Hinata can also do some research and analysis work, in the field of biological research, she is still not as good as Dr. Connors. A few minutes later, Dr. Connors in a white coat came to his office. "I will give you 3 living Super Skrulls, no matter what method you use. I want to know the secret of these Super Skrulls copying the target's abilities. I will ask Hinata to give you the highest research authority. You can use all the resources in Konoha. If you need other help, you can also apply to Hinata at any time." Just a few minutes ago, Dr. Connors was still watching the live broadcast of the battle at the headquarters of the Avengers in his office. He didn't expect that Rog would arrange such an important task for him just after the battle. "No problem. I will complete the task." After making a solemn promise to Rog, Dr. Connors left the office with a satisfied smile. In fact, in Rog's mind, the most suitable research candidate is not Dr. Connors, but Tani and Dr. Banner. But unfortunately, neither of them will carry out this kind of research. This kind of research is against their conscience. Looking at the departing figure of Dr. Connors, Rog sighed helplessly, and then began to think about what other scientific research talents are hidden outside. Konoha has no shortage of combat power, but at present, Dr. Connors is the only scientific research talent. At this time, he once again thought of Orochimaru, the research fanatic. Otherwise, develop in the direction of Orochimaru and become a ninja who understands science. With more and more alien creatures, Rog appreciated Orochimaru's existence more and more. He can fight, resist, and research. If Orochimaru's paranoid character wasn't so serious, he would definitely be the best choice for the 4th Hokage. Although Rog appreciated Minato very much, this doesn't affect his appreciation of Orochimaru. In his view, Minato and Orochimaru are like 2 sides of a coin, one represents light, and the other represents darkness. Light can warm people's hearts, and darkness can also give people strength. Chapter 430. The Skrull attack on the headquarters of the Avengers became the headline without any suspense. Various media outlets reported this in detail, and even the accidents that had long been decided were dug out one by one. While the outside world was crazily discussing the Skrull incident, Tani frowned as he looked at the constantly changing numbers on the voting website. In his imagination, the UA people should be more supportive of the decision to imprison the Skrulls permanently. However, it turned out that he was wrong. It had been less than 24 hours since the voting started. But the results of the voting had already shown a huge gap. The number of people who voted for the death penalty was much higher than the number of people who voted for the permanent imprisonment. As time passed, the gap between the two continued to increase. How could this be? Could it be that I was wrong? Looking at the huge gap in real-time data, Tani fell into deep thought. While Tani was paying attention to the real-time data, Rog, who was sitting in his office, also opened the voting website. However, unlike the frowning Tani, he did not feel the slightest bit surprised when he saw the polarized data, as if he already knew this result. Although Rog did not live in the UA as long as Tawny, compared to Tawny, he was more aware of what the ordinary people were thinking. Tawny was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He lived in a superior environment and received the typical elite education in the UA. Growing up in this environment, even if he had the idea of protecting the people and upholding justice, there was a huge gap between him and the ordinary people. The justice he understood was not necessarily the justice that the ordinary people, who had an absolute advantage in numbers, wanted. Moreover, he neglected a very important point. That was, ordinary people were particularly susceptible to the public's emotions. Simply put, it was easy to follow the crowd and lose the ability to think independently and objectively. For example, as long as a victim of the Skrull incident appeared on the internet, this victim could trigger thousands of ordinary people to vote for the death penalty. Compared to the Skrulls who came from other planets, these ordinary people were more willing to show their kindness to their compatriots who had the same appearance. Therefore, the moment Tawny agreed to the voting, Rog knew that the Skrulls were doomed. It turned out that his guess was correct. After a simple look at the voting data, Rog closed the website and put on the Kree Empire game helmet. He recently found a game called Crysaber 7702 in the Kree Empire's console game library. It was a game with a high score of 9 stars on the Kree Empire's game rating website. Compared to the Skrull's ultimate fate, he was more willing to spend his time pleasing himself. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Just as Roger was engrossed in clearing Crysaber 7702, he received a call from Tony. "Bring your Special Forces team." Tawny's tone was somewhat gloomy. He didn't wait for Rog's reply and directly hung up the phone. The voting for the Skrulls ended yesterday. Although Tawny and the Avengers didn't approve of the final result, they could only choose to accept it. 10 minutes later, Rog brought a 6-man Special Forces team to the Avengers headquarters. The Avengers didn't want to personally end the lives of the Skrulls, so this dirty work naturally fell to Konoha. Rog didn't object to this. The Avengers didn't want to be cruel executioners, but Konoha didn't have such concerns. Even if the Avengers didn't say anything, Rog would have taken the initiative to let Konoha execute the Skrulls. Konoha was different from the Avengers. Konoha didn't need any positive reviews. To some extent, Konoha even took the initiative to develop in the direction that people feared. Reputation and positive reviews were just icing on the cake. Only strength was Konoha's true pursuit. Unlike the previous press conference, the execution process of the Skrulls wasn't broadcasted live. However, at the scene of the execution, there were reporters from various media, as well as some witnesses from the government and the people. The scene of the execution was arranged in a prison in New York. The execution time passed very quickly. It only took less than a minute before it was completely over. It wasn't much different from the previous executions. The only difference was that this time, Konoha's special forces used the blasters that Rog bought from Xander. Did we really do something wrong? Why don't people want to let these Skrulls go? They are clearly no longer harmful. Tawny, who drank half a bottle of whiskey alone, said to Rog with a flushed face. After the execution, Tawny didn't return to the Avengers headquarters. Instead, he took Rog to a bar. Moreover, it was a bar under Rog's name. Although Rog didn't live in New York, he still had a lot of businesses in New York. This bar was one of them. Because he didn't care about making money, after arriving at the bar, Rog directly gave the staff a day off and completely cleared the bar, including the staff. Strictly speaking, you didn't do anything wrong. You're just too idealistic. Unlike Tawny, who drank glass after glass of whiskey, Rog just tasted it at a normal speed. Idealistic? Do you think the world really needs us now? Tawny continued to ask drunkenly. Whether it needs us or not depends on what you think. At least in my opinion, the world still needs us. Rog wasn't as sentimental as Tawny. For him, instead of thinking about these problems, it was better to study how to improve his strength. If you feel lost, I suggest you talk to Dr. Banner. He's a good listener. He may be able to give you some good advice. If you ask me, my suggestion is that you can cultivate some hobbies for yourself to adjust your life. For example, I like to play console games. If you want, I can give you the latest console model of the Carey Empire. Rog gave his own suggestion. Carey Empire? There's such a country on Earth? No, it's an alien country, one of the 3 empires in the universe. When Tawny heard the word universe, his eyes suddenly lit up. He then pressed on Rog's shoulder and said very seriously, I want to go to the Carey Empire. Chapter 431. No. Rog refused Tawny's proposal without even thinking about it. Although the current timeline has become more and more different from what he remembers, he will never agree to Tawny's dangerous request, absolutely not. It is not difficult to send Tawny to the Carey Empire. However, it is Tawny who is sent out, and it may be Tawny Dead Tucker who comes back. Although Tawny's Mark Series Iron Man armor is very good, it is also from the point of view of Earth technology. If it is really made, there are many civilizations in the universe that can make similar or even stronger armor. To put it simply, Rog doesn't think that Tawny has the strength to travel in the universe. Are you rejecting me? For some reason, at this time, the half-drunk Tawny suddenly showed the legendary aura of a domineering president and said to Rog in a serious tone. You drank too much, I'll let illusion take you back, and you won't have these thoughts when you wake up. After that, Rog took out the phone and planned to contact Illusion at the Avengers headquarters. However, just as he took out his phone, Tawny pressed the button on the watch on his right hand, turning the watch into a mechanical glove. Tawny's entire movement is extremely fast, which is completely inconsistent with his current drunken state. When the mechanical glove appeared, Tawny decisively grabbed the phone held by Rog. You want to play fighting in front of me? Rog was a little stunned. Just when Tawny's right hand with the mechanical glove was about to touch his phone, his wrist suddenly turned, and the phone disappeared like magic. Since you're in such a good mood, I'll play with you. As soon as his voice fell, Rog's right hand grabbed Tawny, and he had a close fight with Tawny while sitting in a chair. Although his fighting skills were not as good as Rog's, it could be seen that Tawny had also put in a lot of effort into fighting. Under Rog's intentional control, Tawny, who was wearing the mechanical gloves, managed to withstand dozens of attacks. Then, Rog removed the mechanical glove on his right hand. When the mechanical glove was completely removed, Tawny finally stopped. Don't be too proud. Let me tell you, I'm currently researching the anti-Rog armor. When the time comes, I'll definitely be able to defeat you. Tawny said, unwilling to admit defeat. Anti-Rog armor? After hearing Tawny's self-destruction speech, Rog smiled. He didn't doubt Tawny's level of invention at all. However, Tawny's anti-series armor had always had a tradition of being dismantled. Then we'll talk about it after you finish your research. You're really going back. Glancing at the completely empty bottle in front of Tawny, Rog decided to send him directly back to the headquarters. However, just as he was about to use quantum teleportation to bring Tawny back to the headquarters, a rainbow-like beam of light fell from the sky, directly penetrating the ceiling of the bar, and shrouding Rog and Tawny. Asgard's Bifrost. The next second, the Bifrost disappeared. At the same time, Rog and the drunk Tawny also disappeared. Asgard, in a room in the Golden Palace. Thor, even if you're looking for me, you don't have to be in such a hurry. Can't you wait for me to send him back? Rog rubbed his temples and said helplessly to Thor, who was sitting opposite him. Sorry, I don't know how long you're going to drink. It's urgent, so I can only do this. Thor explained silently, but his explanation was not convincing at all. Urgent? I don't see what's urgent now. After being forcibly pulled to Asgard by the Bifrost, he didn't see any urgent situation in Asgard. Except for the drunk Tawny next to him, everything here was exactly the same as he remembered. This is a secret about Asgard's royal family, so not many people know about it. I just learned about it today. Thor's face was a little complicated. After hesitating for a few seconds, he continued, Loki is my brother, you already know this. But you must not know that I have an elder sister, a half-sister. I actually have an elder sister, and she's not adopted like Loki. Since being arranged to deal with government affairs by Odin, Thor has learned what it means to not show his emotions. But now, he displayed an extremely incredulous expression. I know. Odin told me about this. Rog replied with a calm face. You know? When did you find out? Why didn't I know? Thor asked with a puzzled face. Odin told me the night of the celebration party when we came back from Warnerheim. After the celebration party, Odin told Rog about the goddess of death, Hel, so he knew about it from the beginning. Even if Odin didn't say it, as a transmigrator with a good memory, he couldn't forget the existence of the goddess of death. You. Why didn't you tell me? Thor began to be a little unhappy. In his view, this was Rog betraying their friendship. Odin asked me to keep it a secret. If you have any opinions, you can ask him yourself. After hearing Rog's answer, Thor fell silent. Then, he continued in a low tone, What did father tell you? You should be able to say it now. Of course. Then, Rog gave a simple explanation of what happened that night. As the father of Asgard's gods, Odin was an extremely responsible king and father. He knew that he would die sooner or later, and at the same time, he was also worried that after his death, Thor wouldn't have enough ability to deal with the aftermath. So, he prepared a backup plan for Thor in advance. Rog was the backup plan that Odin prepared for Thor. In the beginning, Odin actually didn't have such thoughts. In the end, what made him make this decision was the battle between Rog and the sea god Njord. Odin recognized his strength and potential, so he entrusted him with the task in advance. Of course, this entrustment was still in the verbal stage, and the final entrustment had not been signed yet. The content of the entrustment could be said to be simple, but it could also be said to be complicated. When the goddess of death escaped, help Thor protect Asgard and ensure that Thor wouldn't be killed by Hela. If possible, don't kill Hela when you stop her and let her live. It had to be said that Odin thought very highly of Rog. At that time, he actually thought that he had the strength to defeat Hela. But in fact, until now, Rog still didn't have absolute confidence that he could defeat Hela. While the goddess of death was not one of the 5 gods of creation, she still possessed unfathomable strength. Chapter 432. The goddess of death, Hela, was the greatest contributor to helping Odin conquer the 9 worlds thousands of years ago. Other than being the first child of Odin, the father of gods, and the first princess of Asgard, Hela was also the executioner of Asgard and the owner of Thor's hammer. The Valkyrie army that Odin had sent out to conquer Hela was completely wiped out by Hela, becoming an army that only existed in legends. Of course, Rog had reservations about the Valkyrie army being completely wiped out. Although he did not see the last Valkyrie on planet Soccer, his instincts told him that Valkyrie did not die in Hela's hands. If Odin had not personally taken away Hela's divine power, Hela would definitely be the strongest person in Asgard after Odin. Although Hela was not a match for Odin back then, she had a terrifying talent that even Odin had a headache over. As long as Hela stepped onto Asgard, her power would increase day by day, endless. It was also because of this that Odin had imprisoned Hela on Earth far away from Asgard, so that she could not use Asgard's strengthening to break the seal. Thousands of years ago, Hela had already possessed such terrifying strength. Now, she would only be stronger than before. However, there was one thing that Rog did not understand at the moment. From Thor's current appearance, Odin should not be dead yet. Since Odin was not dead, it meant that the seal he had set was still there, and Hela was still imprisoned. Odin, is he okay now? After thinking for a few seconds, he asked Thor. Out of respect for Thor and Odin, he used a more tactful method instead of directly asking if Odin was dead. Father shouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Seeing the uncontrollable sadness on Thor's face, Rog also fell silent. I'll take you to see father first. After a few minutes of silence, Thor spoke again. Under Thor's lead, Rog came to Odin's bedroom and saw the sleeping Odin lying on the golden bed, wrapped in a layer of golden energy. Other than Odin, Rog also saw another old face here. He did not know if it was Odin's order or Thor's idea, but Loki, who was imprisoned in the dungeon, was also in the room, and stood by Odin's bed. After seeing his arrival, Loki didn't say anything. He just nodded at him. Roger also nodded slightly at Loki, who was silent, as a form of greeting. Then, he seriously sized up Odin. From the outside, the current Odin was just sleeping, and there was nothing strange. But as long as he was slightly closer to Odin, he could clearly feel the divine power that was constantly emitting from Odin's body. No. This is not the release of divine power. This is the collapse of divine power. As a ninja who usually released energy attacks in battle, Rog could clearly distinguish the difference between the two. The release of energy was the result of active choice. And the collapse of energy was a sign of uncontrollable energy. For a Heavenly Father-level existence like Odin, the uncontrollable collapse of the energy in his body basically meant that his life had come to an end. Since Mother's death, Father's condition has not been good. A few hours ago, Father's divine power suddenly began to collapse and he fainted. We used all the methods we could, but we only managed to wake Father up a little. After waking up, Father told us about Hila's matter, and then asked us to contact you immediately, saying that there is an agreement between you and Father, and that you know how to deal with all of this. Thor said in a low voice. Let's talk about it outside. Seeing Odin, a Heavenly Father existence, gradually approaching death, made Rog, who had always been pursuing power, suddenly have a feeling of impermanence. After leaving Odin's palace, Thor brought Rog and Loki to the meeting hall where he usually worked. What kind of agreement did Father make with you? You can tell us now. Rog had only briefly explained to Thor what Odin had said to him that night, and did not tell Thor the specific details of the agreement. He was now in a dilemma whether to tell Thor the specific details of the agreement. After thinking seriously for a few minutes, he finally made a decision. Odin hopes that I can help you stop Hela and not let Asgard fall into Hela's hands. If possible, he hopes that we can spare Hela's life after defeating her. Rog told him the details of Odin's agreement. What about the reward? Thor, who had already signed several agreements with Rog, was very clear about Rog's work process and immediately asked. After the mission is completed, other than the Tesseract, I can choose any treasure in the palace treasury. Give me the scroll, I'll sign the agreement for Father. Thor did not think that Rog would lie about something like this, so he immediately extended his right hand to Rog. Forget it. There's no need to sign the scroll this time. Even if I return Odin a favor, if he did not rush to Warnerheim, I might not have been able to survive from Njord's hands. When Odin appeared, he still had some strength left. But in the end, it was really hard to say who won and who lost between him and Njord. Give it to me, I don't want Father to leave with an unfulfilled agreement. When Thor spoke, Rog saw a look of pain on his face that he had never seen before. Now Thor is not so much the regent of Asgard, Thor is more like a big boy who is holding back his grief. Looking at Saul's slightly trembling right hand, Rog didn't say anything else. He directly summoned a commission scroll that he hadn't used before. After receiving the commission scroll from Rog, Thor did not hesitate and directly picked up the pen and wrote on the scroll. Soon, a new commission appeared on the system's commission page. Commission content: help Thor and Loki stop Hela from taking Asgard. Commission status: not completed. Commission reward: 350 ninja coins. This commission that should have been signed by Odin eventually became Thor's commission. Because it involves the goddess of death, Thor's commission passed the system's judgment without any suspense, and the system gave the highest commission reward so far. The last commission to rescue Hulk, the system gave a reward of 300 ninja coins. This time, the system directly broke the record of the highest reward. I accept the commission. In fact, regardless of whether the system passed the judgment or not, he would have accepted this commission. Passing the judgment only allowed him to get a higher return. Chapter 433. Although the reward of 350 ninja coins broke the highest record, what really caught Rog's attention was not the reward of ninja coins, but the description and the content of the commission. Records like this, as long as he continues to accept commissions, sooner or later it will be refreshed, the difference is just sooner or later. What attracted his attention now was Loki's name in the commission. Loki, who was imprisoned in the dungeon, appeared in Odin's bedroom and accompanied Odin's bed. And now, Saul had added Loki's name to the list of requests. This also means that Thor really forgave Loki. If Queen Freya didn't die, she would be very relieved to see this scene. After throwing the commission scroll that had completed the mission back into the summon scroll, Rog took a deep breath and directly entered the work state. Now, let's sort out the current situation. First of all, I want to know, is there anyone who knows whether Hela has escaped or not? Hela's current situation is directly related to their next plan. If Hela has escaped, it means that they have completely lost the initiative. After hearing Rog's question, Thor and Loki shook their heads silently. Very good, they know nothing about the enemy's whereabouts. Then do you know the specific location where Odin imprisoned Hela, such as the specific location of the seal's exit? I only know the approximate location of the seal is in Norway. Rog continued to ask. Then, Saul and Loki shook their heads at the same time. This is work, I can't be angry, I must not be angry. Then can you tell me, in addition to what I already know, do you have any other information about Hela? Rog controlled his emotions and asked again. Then, he saw Thor and Loki shake their heads tacitly. Good job. At this moment, Rog began to doubt whether Thor and Loki really want to protect Asgard. As a ninja with good professional ethics, he knows that at this time, he must control his temper, especially now that the commission has just been signed. It's alright, we'll do it step by step. Let's first determine the current state of the seal. If Hela hasn't escaped, we'll think of a way to strengthen the seal. Although the success rate is very low, it's still worth a try. The seal that imprisoned Hela was personally placed by Odin, the Heavenly Father. In terms of strength, they had not reached the level of Heavenly Fathers, so it was unlikely that they could repair or even lay down a seal that was on par with Odin's. However, Rog knew another Heavenly Father level existence. Supreme Wizard Ancient One. As long as Ancient One is willing to make a move, it would not be difficult to make a seal similar to Odin's. I can go to Earth to confirm it. After discovering that they could go to Earth, Loki stood up and said righteously. No, you can't. You are on Kamartaj's blacklist. You are an unwelcome guest. You will only cause more trouble if you go. Although Thor had forgiven Loki, Rog had always been on guard against him. The name of the god of trickery was not for nothing. If he let Loki check the seal, Rog was afraid that he would see him in Hela's camp. Let me go to the seal. I happen to know some top people in the field of magic. I can find the specific location of the seal as soon as possible. After thinking about it, Rog decided to make a trip himself. I will ask Heimdall to pay more attention to the situation of the nearby star fields and the 9 worlds to prevent Hela from secretly entering Asgard. After Rog finished speaking, Thor immediately said. Hela was very strong, otherwise, Odin would not have helped Thor prepare a backup plan in advance. In order to prevent the already troublesome Hela from becoming even more troublesome, it was necessary to prevent her from setting foot on Asgard as much as possible. If Hela secretly entered Asgard and cultivated for a period of time, even if the 3 of them were tied together, they might not be Hela's opponent. Of course, with Hela's arrogant personality, she might not choose to sneak in secretly. Thousands of years ago, Hela dared to fight Odin head-on. After knowing that Odin was about to die, she would be even more unscrupulous. Loki, go to the royal library and see if you can find any records about Hela. I want to know what Hela did back then. Thor did not forget to arrange a mission for Loki. This was also hinting that Loki should not have any thoughts of leaving Asgard. You are the regent. You have the final say. As long as Thor did not inherit the throne, he could not be considered the king of Asgard. Furthermore, Loki might not give up his desire for the throne. Then let's split up first. If anything happens, let Heimdall contact me at any time. After saying that, Rog opened the portal connected to Kamartaj and left Asgard. He didn't know why, but when he set foot on the land of Camartage, he suddenly found that he seemed to have forgotten something. However, this doubt was quickly thrown to the back of his mind. It shouldn't be anything particularly important, so it's fine to forget it. In the reception hall, Rog saw the long-lost Sorcerer Supreme Ancient One. Teacher. In front of Ancient One, Rog said respectfully. In front of others, he may appear very strong, but Ancient One is definitely not one of them. What's the trouble? Ancient One, who was making tea, looked up at Rog and asked in a calm tone. Teacher, you should know the father of all gods, Odin, right? He had a rebellious eldest daughter, and in order to discipline her, he sealed his eldest daughter somewhere in Norway. Odin's divine power has already begun to dissipate. I hope that teacher can help find the seal he left behind in Norway. Originally, I shouldn't bother you with this matter, but as you know, I only know a few spells, so, after taking the tea that Ancient One had just brewed, Rog quickly said the purpose of his visit. You're talking about the goddess of death, Hela. You're late, she left Earth an hour ago. After hearing Ancient One's words, Rog almost spat out the tea in his mouth. How can it be so coincidental? No, how can Ancient One let Hela go so easily? Even Loki can be on Camartage's blacklist. Now that the goddess of death is free, how can Camartage still be so calm? This is not Camartage. Teacher, do you know where she went? Rog asked unwillingly. Camartage won't intervene in things outside Earth, you should know that. Ancient One took a sip of the freshly brewed tea and said calmly. Well, this is really Camartage style. As long as Hela doesn't make waves on Earth, Ancient One won't do anything to her. Chapter 434. Jotunheim, the Kingdom of the Frost Giants. On the deathly silent ice field, a figure was slowly moving forward in the freezing cold wind. This person in black and green tight clothes was none other than the goddess of death, Hel, who had just gotten rid of Odin's seal. After getting rid of the seal, Hel did not return directly to Asgard, but through a secret space channel hidden on Earth, she came to Jotunheim, the hometown of the Frost Giants. Although Hel got rid of Odin's seal and regained her freedom. But the seal imposed by the Heavenly Father-level existence was not so easy to break. In order to leave the cage that had imprisoned her for thousands of years, she almost consumed all the death power in her body. She knew that Odin was not really dead yet, and she also knew that her current state was not suitable for returning to Asgard. So, she came to Jotunheim, planning to restore some strength here, and then return to Asgard that she had been dreaming of for thousands of years. In the beginning, going to Jotunheim was not in her plan. However, the moment she successfully broke through the seal, she saw a bald woman in an orange-yellow mage robe. Sorcerer Supreme Ancient One. As soon as Hel, the goddess of death, escaped, she met Ancient One, who was at the Heavenly Father level like Odin. Under the friendly advice of Ancient One, Hel decisively gave up the idea of restoring her strength on Earth and left Earth for the first time. The ubiquitous cold wind continued to blow towards Hel, who was slowly moving forward, blowing her slightly messy long black hair. Because of excessive consumption of divine power, the clothes on her body, which were like tight clothes, were torn everywhere, revealing the white skin under the clothes. In terms of age, Hel, who had lived for nearly 3,000 years, was an old woman. But in terms of appearance, Hel was no different from a middle-aged woman in her 40s. Strictly speaking, there wasn't much of a difference. At least, the innate aura of a queen on Hel was not something that ordinary people could have. Under the cold wind, Hel walked step by step towards the end of the ice field. Although she was not a frost giant, the cold wind, which was tens of degrees below zero, did not affect her at all. It even made her feel a little warm. Compared with the underworld where she was imprisoned, the harsh environment of Jotunheim was no different from a beautiful paradise. Hela was going to meet an old friend who had once submitted to Asgard. Frost giant Laufey. Back then, when she was fighting with Odin in the Nine Worlds, Hela had dealt with Laufey quite a bit. In her memory, Laufey was one of the few frost giants with developed limbs who had enough intelligence. However, when she dealt with Laufey Lao Fei was not the Frost Giant King yet. At that time, the one sitting on the throne was Lao Fei's father. But at this moment, she would never have thought that Lao Fei had died in the hands of her own son a few years ago. When Gila, who was wearing thin and tattered clothes, continued to move forward on the ice plains, a few storm giants hiding in the cold wind noticed her. Although Jotunheim was the kingdom of the frost giants, there were also storm giants, mountain giants, and other giants here. However, the frost giants had the absolute advantage, so Jotunheim became the kingdom of the frost giants. These storm giants hiding in the cold wind immediately noticed Gila's existence and confirmed her identity as a member of the Asgard god race. Whether it was the frost giants or the storm giants, they did not have a good impression of the Asgard god race. Therefore, these storm giants decisively chose to attack, intending to have a taste of the Asgard god race. However, these storm giants would never have thought that Gila, who seemed extremely weak to them, actually had strength far beyond their imagination. Just as they appeared and were about to say a few harsh words to Gila while enjoying the look of fear on her face, Gila slowly raised her right hand, and a ghostly green flame filled with the power of death appeared in her palm. Before these storm giants could react, the green flames in Gila's hands had already appeared in front of them and started to burn their invisible storm bodies. In just a short 1 or 2 seconds, the dark green flame burned the storm giants' bodies to ashes. Under the entanglement of the dark green flame, 3 irregular green crystal-like crystals floated to Gila's right hand. Without hesitation, Gila directly crushed the green crystal in her hand and absorbed the soul energy contained in it into her body. With the influx of soul energy, the hole in Gila's clothes was rapidly repaired at a speed visible to the naked eye. All the soul energy of the 3 storm giants only repaired the smallest hole in Gila's clothes. After doing all this, Gila continued to walk into the distance. The soul energy of the 3 storm giants could only restore this insignificant amount of strength to Gila, who was only half a step away from the Divine Father level. However, she did not care too much about this. Although Jotunheim was a barren country where not even a blade of grass grew, there were an astonishing number of frost giants here. With these frost giants, she did not have to worry about recovering her strength at all. After learning the news of Gila's escape from Ancient One, Rog did not stay in Kamartaj for too long and directly used teleportation magic to return to Asgard. When he returned to the magnificent Golden Palace again, he finally remembered what he had just forgotten. Tani. The drunk Tani had just been forgotten in the Golden Palace. However, this matter was quickly resolved perfectly, and even Tani himself did not notice. Under Saul's arrangement, the drunk Tony was brought to an extremely luxurious room by a few pretty maids with good temperament and appearance. As for what would happen next, Rog was not very concerned. Having lived in Asgard for a period of time, he was very relieved to leave Tani to these professional maids. Gila has escaped, and she has also left Earth. In the meeting hall where Thor usually worked, Rog told him the news he had received. I will let Heimdall do his best to find Gila's whereabouts, but now, I have a small matter here that I need your help to deal with. After that, Thor handed a top-secret letter that had just been opened to Rog. Although the wax seal on the letter had already been opened, he could still recognize the pattern on the wax seal at a glance. After all, in the process of going to Warnerheim, he had received many similar letters. Chapter 435. This was an urgent confidential military document from Warnerheim's frontline camp. The content was very simple, there was only one sentence. Half an hour ago, Warner Protoss attacked 3 frontline camps at the same time. After reading the contents of the document, Rog frowned slightly. This wasn't right, it was very wrong. It had only been a few years since the last war. If Warner Protoss didn't know something, they definitely wouldn't start another war at this time. And the timing couldn't be so coincidental. It seems that Asgard's confidentiality needs to be strengthened. After handing the letter back to Thor, Rog said quietly. I've already blocked the news as soon as possible, but it's impossible to completely hide the fact that Father's divine power has dissipated. As long as you have enough strength and are familiar with Father's divine power, you can detect this. As Asgard's archenemy, Warner Protoss didn't lack such people. Ocean god Njord and Gulwig both had this ability. From the looks of it, you want me to go to Vanaheim. If it wasn't for him going, Thor wouldn't have shown him the document. At this time, I can't leave Asgard. It's not a problem to let Loki be the commander in the rear, but he's not strong enough. He can't compete with the strong Warner Protoss. You fought with Warner Protoss before, and the soldiers in the camp also recognize you. Even if Ocean God Njord personally makes a move, you're strong enough to compete with him. Thor quickly explained. Although Asgard was a martial artist, there were very few people who could cultivate to Rog's level. Besides himself, Thor couldn't think of anyone more suitable than Rog. It's not a problem to let me go to Warnerheim, but I want to know, what's your psychological bottom line this time? When he only had the second last chakra, he dared to fight Ocean God Njord one-on-one. Now that he had the six-tailed chakra and Yang nine-tailed, he was even less afraid of Njord. There's no bottom line. Thor's answer was simple, but Rog could hear the uncontrollable killing intent in his answer. Odin's divine power had just begun to dissipate, and Warner Protoss couldn't help but start a war again. This was a naked provocation. In this situation, if Thor still tried to solve the problem with mercy, then he wouldn't be worthy of inheriting Asgard's throne. A qualified monarch must have a benevolent heart. But that also depended on the time. Blindly paying attention to benevolence was not the ruler of a country, but a brainless saint. All right. I'll help you with this. If Thor asked him to spare the lives of Warner Protoss soldiers as much as possible like last time, then he definitely wouldn't accept Thor's request this time. The mission he accepted was only to stop Hela from seizing Asgard, not to help Asgard maintain his rule. More importantly, he didn't want to be friends with a coward who couldn't see the situation clearly. If you need any help, you can tell Sif. I'll let her go with you. Thor continued. No need, I'll go alone. Rog directly rejected Thor's suggestion of arranging helpers for him. By the way, if you really want to help me, arrange a comfortable trip for Tawny to Asgard and fulfill his wish of traveling to outer space. After saying that, he left the meeting hall without looking back and used quantum teleportation to arrive at the Bifrost Hall. I'm going to Warnerheim's camp, the one with the most intense battle right now. According to the secret report, Warner Protoss had only started attacking the camp half an hour ago. As long as the Asgard garrison in the camp wasn't too trashy, the camp shouldn't have been completely overrun yet. Okay. Heimdall didn't hesitate and directly inserted the Guardian's sword in his hand into the console in the middle of the hall. Then, the entrance of the Bifrost Bridge shone with a gorgeous rainbow light. The next second, Rog, who was standing at the entrance of the Bifrost Bridge, disappeared and followed the teleportation beam to Warnerheim. The teleportation process didn't take too long. In less than a minute, Rog and the Bifrost Bridge arrived at Warnerheim. When the brilliant light disappeared, he saw a bustling campsite. Looking at the camp full of corpses, arrows, and energy beams flying everywhere, Rog remembered the scene when he first came to Warnerheim. At that time, a similar scene appeared in front of him. But that time, he didn't come through the Bifrost Bridge, and he didn't come alone. At that time, he had Thor, the three warriors of Sengoku, and an entire Asgard army by his side. But now, he was alone. When the Bifrost Bridge arrived at the camp, whether it was the soldiers of Asgard or the soldiers of Warner Protoss, they couldn't help but look in the direction of the Bifrost Bridge. Then, they saw Rog alone. Only one person? After seeing this scene, the soldiers of Asgard and the soldiers of Warner Protoss had the same question in their minds. Then, they saw an even more incomprehensible scene. They saw Rog psychically summon the Yondaime Hokage's Haori and the Thor kunai, and then he put them on as if he didn't see the fierce battle around him. The last time he came, he wore Madara's armor and imitated Madara's battle. This time, he planned to imitate the Yondaime Hokage Minato. When he completely put on the Haori and the kunai, the closest soldiers of Warner Protoss tried to attack him. People who can teleport through the Bifrost Bridge at this time are definitely not weak. Asgard and the soldiers of Warner Protoss were very clear about this. Just when the Warner Protoss soldier took the first step, Rog suddenly disappeared in front of their eyes. Body flicker technique. In just a moment, Rog came in front of the soldiers of Warner Protoss, holding the Thor kunai in his right hand, like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, cutting their throats. Chi! Without any suspense, the Thor kunai pierced their throats like piercing a piece of white paper. The soldiers of Warner Protoss didn't realize what happened at all. The only thing they felt was the severe pain from their throats. Without waiting for the soldiers of Warner Protoss to fall to the ground, Rog threw the bloody Thor kunai. The flying thunder god kunai, which seemed to be thrown out casually, hit the forehead of a Vanna warrior with great precision. After doing all this, his figure disappeared once again. When he reappeared, he was holding 2 clean flying thunder god kunai in his hands. Chapter 436. Although he intended to imitate Minato, Rog didn't throw out all the flying Thor kunai at the beginning of the battle like Minato did. He didn't have as many flying Thor kunai as Minato did. In addition to the 9 flying Thor kunai made of vibranium that were enchanted by Odin, he only prepared 30 ordinary flying Thor kunai. If he wants to use these 39 flying Thor kunai to cover the enemy in the entire camp, he needs to calculate the landing point of each flying Thor kunai. So before throwing out the flying Thor kunai, he doesn't mind using these kunai to deal with some enemies. Rog appeared again like a ghost, and the flying Thor kunai in his hands once again crossed the necks of several Warner Protoss soldiers. Then, just like before, he threw out the flying Thor kunai in his hands. His throwing skills are comparable to a real Uchiha, so he doesn't need to worry about the landing point of the flying Thor kunai. After he once again killed several Warner Protoss soldiers, the Asgard soldiers who had been paying attention to him finally remembered something. Rog. He's Rog. In the last war, although he didn't hold any role as a commander, his achievements were more dazzling than any other commander. Even Thor, who was the commander, couldn't be compared with him at that time. At that time, Rog changed Asgard and Warnerheim's view of the Earthlings with his own strength. He let these arrogant Protoss see the strength of the Earthlings. At this time, after witnessing Rog's incredible killing efficiency, these Asgard soldiers finally remembered his identity. When the first Asgard soldier excitedly shouted out Rog's name, one after another, eyes gathered on him. Some of these gazes were from Asgard warriors, while others were from Warner Protoss warriors. At this moment, they finally understood why the Bifrost only sent one person over. This was because Rog alone was enough to contend against an entire army. Rog noticed the gazes of these people, but he didn't take it to heart and didn't stop what he was doing. Flying Thor kunai were pulled out by him, and Warner Protoss warriors were killed by him one after another. It didn't take long for him to throw out all 39 flying thunder god kunai he had on him. When he threw out these flying Thor kunais, over 100 Warner Protoss were killed by him. After finishing this simple preparation work, he sensed the flying Thor kunai in every corner of the camp, and his expression became extremely serious. When Minato first used this tactic, he killed 50 Jonin from the rock village at once, thoroughly establishing his high status as a Golden Flash can directly give up the mission without being punished. So Rog also wanted to know how many Warner Protoss warriors he could kill by using the same tactic. At this time, there were more than 1,000 Warner Protoss warriors in the camp. If his operation was subtle enough, he could break Minato's record by a large margin. Looking at Rog, who suddenly stopped, Asgard warriors and Warner Protoss warriors couldn't help but take a few steps back. Although they didn't know why Rog stopped, their intuition told them that Rog was preparing to use a powerful killing move. If not necessary, try to stay away from the area where the high-level combatants are. This was the knowledge they learned in the first class of combat training, and it was also the lesson they learned with blood and tears on the battlefield. Just when they were thinking about what kind of killing move Rog was going to use, Rog's figure disappeared from their eyes again. Wasn't it a powerful killing move? Just as these Asgardian warriors showed a trace of disappointment, they suddenly found that the warriors of the Vannas, who had been attacking them frantically, fell to the ground one by one, as if they had been hit by a fatal curse at the same time, and lost their lives one after another. What's going on? Before these Asgard warriors could react, the Warner Protoss warriors near them became motionless corpses. In addition to those Warner Protoss warriors who temporarily withdrew from the camp because of injuries, all the Warner Protoss warriors in the camp lined up to report to the Grim Reaper in less than a minute. The clamorous battle cries suddenly stopped, and the entire campsite suddenly became incomparably quiet. It was so quiet that it was like a ghost town without any life. Until now, these Asgard warriors still didn't know what was going on. The only scene they saw was these Warner Protoss warriors falling down one by one. Finally, these Asgard warriors saw Rog's figure in the area with the most corpses. Rog, wearing the fourth Hokage Haori, stood motionless in the middle of the corpses, his right hand holding a flying Thor kunai that was still dripping blood. Around him, there were Warner Protoss warriors who were still alive and kicking a few seconds ago. A breeze gently blew through the camp, slightly blowing away the bloody smell that filled the whole camp, and blew up Rog's Haori. 45 seconds. 1,106 people. This was the final result Rog achieved by imitating Minato. In order to achieve this result, he performed more than 800 flying Thor moves, consuming more than half of his chakra. This was the craziest use of the flying Thor since he mastered it. Although he had previously killed 400 people in 10 seconds, he still had the record of killing 400 people. But at that time, he and his 32 doppelgangers had worked together to accomplish the feat, but this time, he was alone. After this crazy killing, he finally understood why Minato only used this tactic once in his life. In addition to the environmental reasons, more importantly, although this tactic looks extremely overbearing, it's not cost-effective. Yes, it's not cost-effective. Consuming more chakra than the Sanbai, and only killing more than 1,000 enemies, it's not worth it. If it wasn't for imitating Minato, he could have used more efficient and labor-saving tactics. For example, releasing several large-scale ninjutsu to directly clear the battlefield. After calming down a little bit, the chakra still boiling in his body, he used quantum transmission to the nearest Asgard warrior and raised the flying Thor kunai that was still dripping blood. Ask your commander to arrange for people to collect this weapon from the battlefield, wash it, and send it to your commander's residence. The commander, he died. After hesitating for a few seconds, the Asgard warrior replied with a trembling voice. Then from now on, you are the commander of this camp. After saying that, Rog left without looking back and walked toward the largest barracks in the camp. The largest barracks in the camp is the commander's residence. This is a general rule in the Asgard army. Chapter 437. Asgard has a total of 23 camps in Warnerheim. Camps are divided into 3 levels according to the number of troops stationed and the area under their jurisdiction. The campsite that Logue was in right now was one of the lowest leveled campsites. Among the 23 camps, half of them are level 1 camps with about 1,000 troops stationed there. Level 2 camps have about 2,000 to 3,000 troops stationed there. And the highest level 3 camp is in Warnerheim. There are a total of 3 camps, each of which has more than 5,000 Asgard soldiers. The 3 camps that were attacked this time are 3 level 1 camps. 12 level 1 camps, 8 level 2 camps, and 3 level 3 camps, a total of more than 40,000 soldiers. After the last war, Asgard didn't increase the number of camps in Warnerheim. They just made up the number of soldiers in the camps, which is considered to be giving face to Warner Protoss. Of course, Asgard didn't forget about the war reparations and the loss of personnel. After arriving at the commander's residence, Rog directly found Asgard's camp distribution map and found the location of the other 2 camps. After confirming the location, he once again used quantum teleportation. Another camp that was attacked, Boulder Camp. Captain, haven't the Golden Palace and the other camp's reinforcements arrived yet? A young Asgard soldier who looked like he just reached adulthood asked the captain next to him. They will come, the reinforcements will definitely come. While answering, the brawny man with a huge scar on his face used the giant axe in his hand to cut down a Warner Protoss soldier who tried to step forward. Bring it on, you Vanir bastards. My axe is thirsting for blood. After cutting down a Warner Protoss soldier, the brawny captain shouted at the Warner Protoss soldiers in the distance. Captain, you should stop shouting. If you shout a few more times, our defense line won't be able to hold on. Bell, how many times have I told you? You have to show the dominance of the Asgard when facing these Vanir bastards. As soon as he finished speaking, the brawny man with the giant axe took the initiative to rush out. Like a crazy brown bear, he wantonly attacked the surrounding Warner Protoss warriors. Just as the young warrior named Bell was about to rush out with the captain, a brilliant aurora-like light appeared in front of him, stopping him from trying to rush out of the defensive line. When the brilliant light dissipated, Bale saw a person he had only seen in videos and posters. Rog. He was Rog. Unlike the Asgard warriors from the previous camp, Bale recognized Rog at a glance. His face was filled with excitement as if he had met his idol. In a sense, Rog was Bale's idol. In the last war, Bale wasn't part of the Warnerheim garrison, nor was he a member of the Asgard reinforcements. However, after he learned that there was an earthling named Rog who shone in the battlefield of Warnerheim, he began to pay attention to Rog. At first, he was like the other Asgard people, not believing the battle reports from the front line. But as Rog's battle records increased, he began to collect information about Rog. Through some channels, he bought magic stones with recordings of Rog's battles. Even now, he could still remember clearly how excited he was when he saw Rog fighting the three Storm brothers alone and successfully killing them. At that moment it was as if he saw a living heroic spirit walking out of the Hall of Valhalla, a glorious warrior forever remembered in the glorious history of Asgard. From that day onwards, he became a fanatical fan of Rog. He collected all the magic stones with recordings of Rog's battles that he could find. He even hung a huge poster that was more than 2 meters long in his room. In order to get closer to his idol, he even took the initiative to apply for a transfer from the city defense to the Warnerheim garrison. Although he knew that Rog might never appear on the battlefield of Warnerheim again, this didn't affect his determination to follow in Rog's footsteps. Since he came to Warnerheim, he would go to the places where Rog fought whenever he had a holiday to see the traces left behind by Rog's battles with his own eyes. And now, he finally saw his idol. After teleporting to Camp Boulder, Rog wanted to directly join the battle and quickly finish off the Warner Protoss soldiers attacking the camp. But when he felt Bell's strange gaze on him, he turned around with a puzzled expression. At first, he thought it was someone he had dealt with before looking at him. Then, he saw the unfamiliar young face of Bale, and the eyes that were not unfamiliar to him. This guy, is he my fan? He had seen Bale's eyes on a lot of young fangirls. Those fanatical fans showed the same look when they saw their idols. He just glanced at Bale, then withdrew his gaze and observed the situation on the battlefield. Compared to the previous camp, Camp Boulder's situation was obviously much better. Not only did Camp Boulder's defense not break, but they were also evenly matched with the Warner Protoss army, which had twice as many soldiers. In terms of individual combat power, Asgard's soldiers were stronger than Warner Protoss's soldiers. This was one of the main reasons why Asgard didn't increase the number of troops stationed in Warnerheim. However, this wasn't the only reason why Camp Boulder's defense hadn't been broken. The reason why Camp Boulder's results were so different was because of the command of the camp's commander. They were both level 1 camps, and Camp Boulder faced more enemies, but the combat power they displayed was completely different. After a few seconds of observation, Rog had a plan. He didn't need to kill these Warner Protoss soldiers alone, he just needed to give Camp Boulder's garrison a chance to counterattack, and Camp Boulder would be able to defeat the enemy. After discovering this, he didn't hesitate and cast a high-level ninjutsu that could change the terrain. Would release, Tree World Descent. He clasped his hands together, and chakra in his body quickly operated, and huge trees that needed several people to wrap their arms around came out of the ground. After a few seconds, a lush forest several times bigger than Camp Boulder was born, shrouding the entire battlefield. Asgard's soldiers and Warner Protoss's soldiers didn't know the name of this ninjutsu, but they weren't unfamiliar with this ninjutsu. Back when he was fighting the god of the ocean, Niold, Rog had used Tree Realm Descent in his Sage mode. But at that time, he used Sage mode, would release, Tree World Descent. Asgard's soldiers and Warner Protoss's soldiers couldn't tell the difference between would release and would release, but they knew that this move belonged to Rog, the same Rog who once injured Njord. When the lush forest created by Tree World Descent descended, Camp Boulder's commander didn't hesitate and directly ordered the entire army to counterattack. If he couldn't even seize such an obvious opportunity to counterattack, he wouldn't have been able to rely on his own command to defend the camp so well. All troops, attack! The high and majestic horn sounded, and Asgard's soldiers who had been suppressing their anger rushed out of the camp like a pack of wolves. Chapter 438. Rog's Tree World descent completely changed the situation on the battlefield. At this time, Asgard's soldiers turned into deadly hunters, crazily chasing after the Warner Protoss soldiers in the unreasonably lush forest. After using Tree World descent, Rog didn't immediately choose to leave. Instead, he manipulated the trees in the forest, turning the forest into a hell that the Warner Protoss soldiers could never escape from. Relying on the huge advantage provided by Tree World descent, Asgard's soldiers erupted with strength far beyond their usual, directly pushing the battle into a one-sided situation. When most of Asgard's soldiers crazily rushed into the forest, continuously reaping the lives of the Warner Protoss soldiers, Rog's fanatic Bel still stayed in place. Looking at Rog, who was only 2 or 3 meters away from him, Bel suddenly had an idea in his mind. I have to go up and say hello to him. I have to say something to him face to face. After barely suppressing the uncontrollable excitement in his heart, Bel put away the long sword in his hand and walked step by step toward Rog. Although Rog's main focus was on controlling the trees, he still immediately noticed Bel's action. What does this guy want to do? Just when he was thinking about whether to distance himself from this somewhat abnormal fan, Bel with a nervous expression came in front of him and said in a trembling voice. Sir Rog, hello. I'm a sword and shield soldier from the 27th Squad of the Boulder Camp. My name is Bel. Looking at the nervous young sword and shield soldier, Rog slightly frowned. After a few seconds of silence, he opened his mouth and said, Your mission now should be to chase after the enemy, not to come and say hello to me. Do you understand, soldier? If it was any other time, he wouldn't mind taking a photo or saying hello to his fan. But now, it was obviously not the time to do these things. Bale never thought that he would receive such a reply. Although Rog didn't say it explicitly, there was only one meaning in his words, and that was Bel didn't listen to orders and left his post without permission. For a warrior, this was a very serious accusation. If strictly pursued, this could even send Bale directly to the military court. Lord Rog, I'm not, Bel wanted to explain, but when he saw the increasingly impatient expression on Rog's face, he finally chose to shut up and lowered his head. In the end, Bale, who was hit by reality, turned around with a lonely face and ran towards the forest. Live well, don't die in Warnerheim. Rog said silently as he looked at Bale, who was obviously not in his right state of mind. He didn't reject young people chasing stars, but he didn't like young people chasing stars regardless of the occasion. Although he was dissatisfied with Bale's untimely behavior, he didn't want to see a young man like Bale die in the forest, so he silently reminded him. After hearing the voice behind him, Bale suddenly stopped. A few seconds later, his lonely mood was replaced by excitement as he ran towards the forest. Bale's sudden episode didn't affect Rog's control of the world of trees. More than 10 minutes later, most of the Warner Protoss soldiers who attacked Camp Boulder were forever left in the forest and became nutrients for the growth of the forest. When the battle at Camp Boulder came to an end, Rog didn't stop and began to rush to the next camp. A brilliant aurora-like light flashed on his body, and in the next second, his figure disappeared with the light. The third camp to be attacked was a camp called Fong. Unlike Camp Maple and Camp Boulder, which were located near the forest and plains, Fong was located on a mountain peak that looked like a beast's fong. It was because of this mountain peak that the camp had the name Fong. Camp Maple was the first camp Rog went to, and it was also the most intense camp with the most losses. Because of the death of the commander, Camp Maple didn't organize an effective defense, and nearly half of the soldiers died at the hands of Warner Protoss soldiers. The situation at Camp Boulder was completely different from Camp Maple. When he used quantum transmission to leave Camp Boulder, Rog slightly sensed the number of soldiers left in Camp Boulder. More than 800 people. Even in the face of twice the number of enemies, Camp Boulder only lost less than 200 people. At the cost of less than 200 deaths, almost all of the invading Warner Protoss soldiers were wiped out. This was a glorious record. Although this exaggerated loss ratio had a lot to do with Rog's world of trees. But no matter what, it couldn't be denied that Camp Boulder's commander's exquisite command and the strength of the camp soldiers. Among the 3 attacked camps, the situation at Fong was neither good nor bad. The sharp Fong camp's defensive line was not completely breached like the Maple Leaf camps, nor was it completely defended like the Boulder camps. Unlike the last teleportation, Rog didn't teleport directly to the K9 camp this time. Instead, he was teleported to a 20-meter tall tree near the camp. He hung upside down on a 10-centimeter thick branch like a bat. After observing the situation in the camp from above, he quickly came up with a plan. In fact, this wasn't a plan, it was just a decision on which ninjutsu to use. Camp Maple suffered the most losses, and what they needed was him to turn the tide and directly defeat the invading enemy. And Camp Boulder, who was in the best situation, needed him to provide a perfect opportunity to counterattack and create an opportunity for Camp Boulder to take the initiative. As for Fong Camp, the help they needed was very simple, and that was to help them make up for their disadvantage in numbers. Although Asgard's soldiers were better than Warner Protoss's soldiers in terms of individual combat power, their strength hadn't reached the level where they could directly ignore the advantage in numbers. Since Fong Camp needed help in numbers, Rog, as the reinforcements, would naturally fulfill their wish. Rog, who was hanging upside down on the branch, suddenly raised his hands and imitated Naruto's multiple shadow clone jutsu, forming a seal. For him, who can cast ninjutsu without seals, forming seals or not doesn't affect his release of ninjutsu. But sometimes, he will release ninjutsu through hand seals like a real ninja. Multiple shadow clone jutsu. Chanting in his heart, Rog's chakra ran wildly. In the next second, thousands of white smoke appeared out of thin air near the camp. When the smoke dissipated, rogues who were either standing or squatting appeared on the battlefield one after another. Multiple shadow clone jutsu and shadow clone jutsu have no difference in principle. As long as the caster has enough chakra, he can create thousands of shadow clones at once. Chapter 439. What kind of experience would it be to suddenly see thousands of people who looked exactly the same in a stalemate on the battlefield? A lot of people wouldn't be able to answer this question. After all, twins were common, but thousands of people who looked exactly the same weren't easy to find. At this time, the Asgard warriors and the Warner Protoss warriors who attacked the camp had the qualifications to answer this question. An incomprehensible miracle. Whether it was the warriors of Asgard or the warriors of the Vanir gods, after seeing these thousands of shadow clones, the same or similar thought came to their minds. Just as the Asgard warriors and the Warner Protoss warriors were looking at these shadow clones in disbelief, these shadow clones tacitly attacked at the same time. When the shadow clones attacked the Warner Protoss warriors who obviously hadn't reacted yet, Rog, who was hanging upside down on the branch, suddenly used the body flicker technique. In the next second, he was hanging upside down on another branch. Standing in a normal posture, he silently observed the battle around him. Gathering chakra at his feet allowed him to hang upside down on the branch like a bat, but chakra couldn't change gravity, so hanging upside down for a long time would cause blood to rush to the brain. At first, the Asgard warriors in the camp didn't understand what was going on. But when they saw that the shadow clones only attacked the Warner Protoss warriors and didn't attack them, they instantly reacted. Reinforcements. These are reinforcements. Although these reinforcements were completely different from what they imagined, but no matter what, these thousands of shadow clones were genuine reinforcements. With the addition of the shadow clones, the stalemate situation quickly lost its balance, and the scales of victory quickly tilted towards Asgard's side. Although the shadow clones didn't have strong resistance, as long as they were hit by a sword, they would turn into smoke and disappear. But it wasn't easy to hit these shadow clones. These shadow clones not only had all of Rog's fighting skills, but they could also use ninjutsu like him. Except for the fact that they couldn't use Kekkei Genkai, and those spells and abilities that didn't belong to the ninjutsu system, these shadow clones weren't much different from Rog himself. The only difference was that their resistance was weakened to the extreme. When these shadow clones joined the battle came to an end at a speed visible to the naked eye. In less than 3 minutes, all the Warner Protoss warriors who came to attack fell on this Fang-like mountain peak. When the last Warner Protoss warrior fell down with a face of disbelief, Rog removed most of the shadow clones, leaving only one. However, the remaining shadow clone didn't stay in the camp for too long. It used Flying Thunder God to return to Maple Leaf Camp where it first started. Rog didn't forget that his 38 Flying Thor Kunai were still in the camp. Southeast of the Fang camp, in a temporary camp more than 60 kilometers away. Is there still no news from the troops that attacked the Maple Leaf, Boulder, and Fang camps? In the commander's tent, Vigtigny, wearing a pale golden armor, said in a dissatisfied tone. More than half an hour has passed since the agreed time of attack. According to normal circumstances, the 3 vanguard troops should have already sent back the battle report. Sir, we haven't received the battle report from the vanguard troops yet. More than 10 minutes ago, the signal soldier that attacked the Boulder camp sent back an incomplete report. This is all the content of the report. After that, the commander, who was at least twice as old as Vigtigny, handed over a piece of paper with only a few words written on it. The content on the paper was very simple, only a name and a description. Reinforcements. Rog, from a military point of view, this wasn't a qualified military report. But this didn't prevent Vigtigny from understanding the meaning. After seeing Rog's name written on it, the serious Vigtigny suddenly showed a puzzled look. Rog? How could it be him? Of course, Vigtigny wouldn't forget Rog. After all, this was a man who almost killed her and defeated her. However, at this time, she didn't understand why Rog, who had disappeared for several years, suddenly appeared in the Boulder camp. He joined Asgard? This was the first thought that appeared in Vigtigny's mind. But in the next second, she ruled out this speculation. After the end of the last war, she specifically asked people to investigate Rog's background and knew that he coincidentally joined Asgard's army. And if Rog really became a member of Asgard after the war, Warner Protoss's spies would have sent back the information early on. Seeing Vigtigny looking at the paper in her hand with a puzzled look, Weigelf, who was standing next to her, took the initiative to walk over and took the paper from Vigtigny's hand. When Weigelf took the paper from her hand, Vigtigny finally reacted. Then, she returned to her previous serious look and said without any emotion, "The 3 vanguard units in front have failed." Pass down the order, the army immediately returned to Asia. Vigtigny's order made the other generals in the tent show a puzzled look. Even if the 3 vanguard units failed, the main force of the army was still there. There was no need to retreat. "My lady, should we reconsider?" After a few seconds of silence, a general tried to probe. "Are you doubting my judgment?" Vigtigny glanced at the general and said in a cold tone. "This subordinate doesn't dare." In a few seconds, the generals in the tent disappeared completely and began to arrange for the return of the army to Asia. "Sister, if he really comes, what should we do?" Weigelfa's right hand gushed out a light blue energy flame and burned the paper in her hand. "I don't know, I really don't know." Vigtigny replied with a bitter smile. A few hours ago, they had learned from their mother, Gulwig, that Odin's divine power had dissipated. Not long after they learned the news, ocean god Njord gave the order to attack Asgard's camp and appointed the 2 of them as the main generals of the army. Although they didn't think that this was a good time to attack Asgard's camp, they couldn't disobey Njord's order and could only lead the army to set off. Before attacking the camp, they had considered that Asgard would send reinforcements. However, they didn't expect that the reinforcements sent by Asgard would be Rog. Therefore, things suddenly became a little out of control. When Vigtigny ordered the army to withdraw to Asia, Rog took the clean Thor Kunai from the shadow clone and left the camp alone. Chapter 440. After knowing that Rog was going to attack the main forces of Warner Protoss, the commander of the Fang's camp wanted to lead the troops to go with him. But Rog rejected the proposal. Bringing them along with him would only slow him down. Rog didn't plan to stay in Warnerheim for too long. He had a bigger problem to deal with and didn't have that much time to waste. While waiting for the shadow clone in the Fang's camp, he used chakra to confirm the location of the Warner Protoss army. The Warner Protoss army that attacked the 3-level 1 camps was clearly just the vanguard. If he wanted to calm Warnerheim down again, getting rid of these 3 vanguard forces was far from enough. So he decided to take drastic measures and get rid of the Warner Protoss army more than 60 kilometers away. Only in this way could he completely dispel the thoughts of Warner Protoss that they shouldn't have. The reason why he made this decision was also related to the 2 familiar life energy signals he sensed. Victigny and Weigelf. He was still thinking about who would lead the Warner Protoss army this time. He didn't expect it to be the Victigny sisters. After considering the strength of the 2 Victigny sisters, he decisively made the decision to charge into the enemy camp alone. At this time, the Warner Protoss army was making the final preparations to retreat. They planned to retreat to the main city of Asia City behind them. But they didn't expect that they were about to see a nightmare that they couldn't forget until now. In front of the gate of the temporary camp, a gorgeous light suddenly flashed. Then, Rog, who was wearing a white haori, appeared. The Warner Protoss soldiers responsible for guarding the gate of the camp immediately noticed Rog's arrival. But before they could shoot the arrows in their hands, 100-meter-wide orange-red flame arrived in front of them like a tsunami. Fire release, grand fire annihilation. Boom! The orange-red flame that covered the sky fiercely hit the gate of the camp and the wooden fence next to it. In an instant, the gate and the fence were swallowed up. The Warner Protoss soldiers who couldn't dodge in time were instantly wrapped in the flame. They let out miserable screams and died with intense pain and unwillingness. Rog's grand fire annihilation shocked everyone in the camp. He used his own method to announce his arrival. After he announced his arrival in a domineering manner, dark thunderclouds quickly gathered in the sky above the camp. Muffled sounds of thunder could be heard from the thunderclouds. In the next moment, 2 huge bolts of lightning, several meters wide, struck the ground dozens of meters in front of Rog. After the lightning disappeared, the Victigny sisters appeared in front of him, wearing light golden armor. "We're old friends, I won't waste words. Surrender, or die." As soon as his voice fell, the Kusanagi no Tsurugi sword was summoned into his hand, and light blue lightning instantly wrapped around it. "Now you're even more domineering than Odin. If you want us to surrender, then let's see if you have the ability to do so." Looking at the aggressive Rog, Victigny and her sister didn't hesitate and directly pulled out their respective weapons. The sword in Victigny's hand was the 2-handed greatsword that she had once lost to Log, the Wrath of the Hurricane. As for the rapier in Weigelfa's hand, he never knew the name of it. He never had the interest to know the name of the weapon of his defeated opponent. After Victigny and her sister pulled out their weapons, Rog didn't immediately attack. Instead, he summoned 4 wood clones. The shadow clone's ability to resist attacks was too weak. They would disappear after being hit by a lightning bolt. So when facing Victigny and her sister, the wood clones would be more useful. "I didn't expect that after not seeing you for a few years, you'd become a man who bullies others with numbers." After seeing Rog's 4 wood clones, Victigny said with a look of disdain. She had fantasized about fighting Log again more than once, but she had never thought that Log would use such a tactic to bully her with numbers. Bully others with numbers? No, you've misunderstood. These clones are not used to bully others with numbers, but to prevent you from escaping. After all, if tens of thousands of people escape, it's quite troublesome to catch them one by one. As soon as Rog finished speaking, the 4 wood clones beside him disappeared. Not good. He's planning to use a barrier. Before Victigny could react, Weigelf saw through Rog's plan. Weigelfa's amazing intuition had left a deep impression on Rog. However, he wasn't worried that Weigelf would see through his plan. As long as he was still standing here, Weigelf wouldn't dare to leave Victigny's side, let alone chase after his wood clones. It didn't take long for his 4 wood clones to come to the designated position and cast barrier ninjutsu. For purple flame formation. The four purple flame formation that was once performed at the headquarters of the Avengers was once again performed, and the rectangular purple barrier completely enveloped the entire camp. You're all surrounded by me. When the four purple flame formation was formed, Rog also achieved a new achievement. One person surrounded an army of tens of thousands of people. This feeling is very cool. After achieving this achievement, Rog, holding the Kusanagi sword, attacked Victigni and Kagura. His figure suddenly disappeared and appeared in front of Victigni like a flash. The Kusanagi sword in his hand directly slashed at Victigni's delicate face. However, just as he waved the Kusanagi sword in his hand, Weigulfa's rapier blocked the Kusanagi sword's attack in advance. At the same time, Victigni's hurricane's fury slashed at him with the power of thunder. Clang! Weigulfa's rapier blocked the Kusanagi sword without any suspense, and the crisp sound of metal colliding suddenly sounded. In this regard, Rog didn't have any surprise. Lightning body flicker. With the power of thunder, the hurricane's fury directly crossed the lightning left by Rog's lightning body flicker. Boom! The power of thunder on the hurricane's fury slammed into the ground, leaving a several meters long sword mark on the ground. After dodging the attack of the hurricane's fury, Rog didn't immediately launch a second wave of attacks. Instead, he raised his left hand and slowly stroked the blade of the Kusanagi sword. After seeing Rog's slightly abnormal action, Weigulf, who had amazing intuition, frowned slightly. Her intuition told her that Rog was planning something. However, she couldn't guess what Rog was planning. For her amazing intuition, this was something that had never happened before. No need to guess, although your intuition is amazing, it can even be said to have the effect of foreseeing the future. But unfortunately, your intuition isn't really foreseeing the future, so don't waste your energy. Chapter 441. The first time he fought with Weigulf, Rog found that her intuition was unreasonably accurate. At that time, he purely thought that this was a gift that Vigor was born with, just like the owl that he had met before who was born with divine power. However, as his strength and knowledge continued to grow, he found that he was wrong. Weigulfa's amazing intuition was definitely not an external manifestation of divine power. The reason was simple. If Weigulfa's amazing intuition was really an external manifestation of divine power, then it meant that she would awaken divine power in the future. It was a divine power related to time, such as predicting the future. However, any power related to time required an extremely high level of power to control. For example, a universal treasure like the time gem. Even the father of gods, Odin, who was a powerful existence at the level of a divine father, could only barely predict the future and slightly touch upon the power of time. And Weigulf did not look like she could surpass Odin in the future. Therefore, Rog could conclude that Weigulfa's amazing intuition had nothing to do with the power of time or foresight. After eliminating the ability to foresee the future and the power of time, the only options left were prediction and mind reading. Prediction, mind reading, lightning. After combining these elements, Rog thought of a guy who called himself God. Although this guy was a character from another world, it didn't stop Rog from using him as a sample for his speculations. They both mastered the power of lightning and could predict the opponent's next move. The more he thought, the more Rog felt that he had found the truth. Of course, all of this was just his speculation. In order to prove this speculation, he planned to do a small test on the spot. When Rog's left hand strangely swept across the back of the Kusanagi sword, Weigulfa's uneasiness became more and more obvious. She knew what Rog was planning and that the source of danger was the Kusanagi sword in Rog's hand, but she could not guess what Rog wanted to do with the Kusanagi sword. The only thing she could be sure of was that Rog would continue to attack with the Kusanagi sword. Without waiting for Weigulf to continue thinking, Rog launched another attack. This time, he did not choose Victigni as his target. Instead, he went straight for Weigulf. In the blink of an eye, he traversed tens of meters and arrived in front of Weigulf. He instinctively struck with his Kusanagi sword. Clang! 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 The Kusanagi sword in Roger's hand was like a storm as it rained down on Weigulf, but Weigelf blocked it one by one. But even so, Rog didn't stop attacking. Even when Vigtigny attacked him with her Wrath of the Hurricane, he only dodged slightly before attacking Weigelf again. It wasn't the first time that Weigelf and Vigtigny fought with Rog, but they had never seen Rog like this. At this time, Rog was like a ruthless sword-wielding machine, crazily waving his Kusanagi sword. Although Rog's attacks were as dense as a storm, he never hit Weigelf. No matter how subtle his moves were, no matter how tricky his attack angle was, Weigelf's rapier was always able to block his Kusanagi sword. In just 10 seconds, Rog waved his sword hundreds of times at Weigelf. And then, nothing. When Vigtigny couldn't help but use a large-scale lightning attack to force Rog back and prevent him from continuing to attack Weigelf, Rog took the initiative to give up the attack and quickly retreated, once again increasing the distance between them. After putting enough distance between them, Rog didn't do anything. Instead, he started counting down silently. 2, 1, at the moment when his countdown ended, Weigelf's rapier suddenly burst out a weak electric current, directly hitting Weigelf's right hand that was holding the rapier. It actually worked. For Weigelf, who has mastered the power of lightning, this sudden burst of electric current was nothing. It didn't even leave an obvious mark on her skin. But after being hit by this electric current, Weigelf's face showed a look of disbelief. How is this possible? When did he leave this electric current? Are you surprised to find that the intuition you are so proud of has failed? Unlike the shocked Weigelf, Rog was a bit calm at this time. When did you do it? Why didn't I notice it at all? Weigelf asked with a dignified face. It's normal that you didn't notice it, because I didn't know when this electric current was passed. Rog was telling the truth. He really didn't know when this electric current appeared on Weigelf's rapier. When his left hand swept the Kusanagi rapier, he wrapped the blade of the Kusanagi rapier with chakra. In this chakra, he deliberately left a thunder attribute chakra that will turn into electric current after 15 seconds. Every time the Kusanagi rapier collides with the rapier, a part of the chakra will be transmitted to the rapier. Whether the thunder attribute chakra will be transmitted to Weigelf's rapier, or when it will be transmitted, Rog himself didn't know. So before the 15 seconds were up, he took the initiative to end the attack, in order to see if the thunder attribute chakra was transmitted. It turned out that after he swung the rapier hundreds of times, the thunder attribute chakra was transmitted to the rapier. Whether the electric current could hurt Weigelf or not was not the main point. The main point was whether Weigelf could discover this move that even he himself didn't know if it worked or not. If Weigelf didn't discover it, then it meant that his guess was correct. Weigelf was the same as the guy who called himself God. She could only predict the enemy's conscious attack. As for how to defeat an enemy who could predict his own attack, the other guy who could freely stretch and rebound his body gave the answer with his own experience. Unconscious attack. As long as you don't know how you will attack, then of course, others can't predict it. This is the so-called King's Prediction meets Bronze's movement. Even if you are a peak king, you can't predict the Bronze's movement. To a certain extent, this could be considered as a manifestation of the mutual promotion and suppression of all things in the world. Okay, the test is over, let's get to the point. Although Rog wasn't a bronze, this didn't stop him from imitating the Bronze's movement. No, it can't be an imitation. Imitation is conscious, and the Bronze's movement is a kind of unconscious behavior that even the user doesn't know the reason for. Chapter 442. It was extremely difficult for a bronze player to perform a king-level maneuver. Similarly, it was not easy for a king-level player to perform a bronze-level maneuver. Anyone who could reach the king level would not have any obvious shortcomings in terms of awareness, skills, experience, mentality, and other aspects. But bronze-level players were different. In terms of these basic skills, bronze-level players did not have any shortcomings, but all of them were shortcomings. Therefore, in order to perform a bronze-level maneuver, attack that Weigelf could not intuitively detect, Rog had to do something he had never done in a battle before. To put it nicely, it was called emptying the mind and giving control of the body to instinct, allowing the body to perform an attack that was completely out of the control of the mind. To put it bluntly, it was a dazed and absent-minded. Because the mind was already in a dazed and absent-minded state, the attack that the body would perform was something that even the person himself could not determine. When Rog completely emptied his mind, he fell into a philosophical state. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? At this moment, Rog seemed to have been possessed by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. He began to think about the three ultimate philosophical questions in idealism that still had no answers. Of course, feeling that he was possessed by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato was just Rog's own opinion. As a member of the Warner Protoss, Vigtigny and Weigelf certainly did not know who Plato was. Therefore, from their point of view, Rog seemed to have been struck by a powerful mental retardation spell. He had turned from an invincible warrior to a village idiot who only knew how to chase after chickens and dogs. What's wrong with him? Looking at Rog, whose aura had undergone a drastic change in an instant, Vigtigny asked Wild, who was beside her. I don't know, it looks like he was hit by a mental retardation spell. But with his strength, even if he was hit by a mental retardation spell, he shouldn't have become like this. Weigelf couldn't understand how Rog could suddenly become such a fool. The Vigtigny sisters were worried that Rog was plotting something, so they didn't take the initiative to attack at all. They carefully guarded against his attacks. They did not take the initiative to attack, and Rog, who had already considered the three ultimate philosophical questions, could not take the initiative to attack. Thus, a slightly strange confrontation was born. Time slowly passed. When the Warner Protoss warriors in the camp couldn't help but whisper to each other, Vigtigny and Weigelf finally couldn't take it anymore. At this time, nearly 10 minutes had passed since Rog started thinking about philosophical questions. Vigtigny and Weigelf didn't know that Rog came alone, so they began to suspect that Rog was deliberately stalling for time to buy time for the troops behind. In the end, after looking at each other, Vigtigny and Weigelf made the decision to attack. Whether Rog really lost his mind or not, they didn't plan to continue the confrontation. In the blink of an eye, they arrived in front of Rog with lightning wrapped around their bodies. The weapons in their hands attacked Rog one after the other. However, just as Vigtigny's Hurricane Fury and Weigelf's Rapier were about to hit Rog's body, he suddenly moved like a fool. Lightning body blink. Rog, who was expressionless as if he was in a daze, suddenly disappeared. The Hurricane Fury and Rapier lost their target at the same time. When Rog's figure disappeared again, Vigtigny and Weigelf were even more convinced that he was stalling for time. Without any hesitation, Vigtigny and Weigelf retracted their weapons and began to sense Rog's whereabouts. But at this time, Rog flashed behind Vigtigny like a ghost. Clang! Rog's Kusanagi sword was blocked by the Hurricane Fury, and it was directly sent flying by the Hurricane Fury. At the moment when the Kusanagi sword was sent flying, Weigelf's rapier once again appeared in front of Rog. In the past few years, Vigtigny and Weigelf have never slacked off, constantly honing their skills, in order to defeat Rog with their own hands one day. Stronger fighting techniques, more power of thunder, and more tacit joint attacks. Vigtigny and Weigelf's strength has indeed improved a lot, but in the past few years, it's not just the two of them who have improved significantly. Just when Weigelf's rapier was about to pierce Rog's throat, a large amount of chakra suddenly erupted from Rog's body. At the same time, his body spun at high speed like a top. 8 trigrams palm, revolving heaven. A light blue hemispherical chakra energy shield instantly formed, and Vigtigny and Weigelf were sent flying. The chakra energy shield appeared quickly and disappeared quickly. Almost at the moment when Vigtigny and Weigelf were sent flying, the high-speed chakra energy shield disappeared. Lightning body blink. Soft fist, 8 trigrams palm. Rog, who was still in the center of the energy shield, instantly flashed behind Weigelf, who was flying backward, and wrapped his hands around the light blue chakra. Before Weigelf could react, his hands hit Weigelf like bullets from a Gatling gun. Muda 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 muda. It took less than 2 seconds for Rog to strike all 64 palms of the 8 trigrams on Weigelf's body. He injected his chakra into her body and sealed the thunder power in her body. Although Vigtigny wanted to rescue Weigelf, she was too slow. Even after Rog finished his 64 palms, she was still more than 10 meters away from Rog. Although 64 palms of the 8 trigrams palm was not steel fist, Weigelf, who was hit by Rog all over her body, could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. After sending Weigelf flying, Rog took out a flying Thor kunai and threw it at Vigdigny, who was rushing towards him. Clang! Although Rog's throwing technique was very good, his direct throwing attack was blocked by the wrath of the hurricane without any suspense. The flying Thor kunai that was sent flying by the wrath of the hurricane flew past Vigdigny's left shoulder. However, at this time, Rog's left hand held the flying Thor kunai that was sent flying. His right hand was holding a super jade Rasengan that was bigger than him. Flying Thor 2. Super Jade Rasengan. Boom! The Super Jade Rasengan in Rog's right hand hit Vigdigny like an intercontinental missile, and a terrible explosion sounded. Before Vigdigny could react, the Super Jade Rasengan in Rog's hand had hit her body. The huge explosion sound resounded through the entire camp, making the Warner Protoss soldiers who witnessed this scene could not help but feel nervous. From the moment Vigdigny and her sister attacked Rog until now, only a few seconds had passed. But in these few seconds, Rog used a set of not complicated ninjutsu and taijutsu combo to establish the victory in one fell swoop. Lightning Body Blink, 8 trigrams palm, Revolving Heaven, 8 trigrams palm 64 palms, Flying Thor 2, Super Jade Rasengan. Except for the Super Jade Rasengan, the other moves were not particularly powerful. But he used these small moves to defeat Vigdigny and her sister, who had obviously improved their strength. Chapter 443. Asgard's Golden Palace, inside the meeting hall. So you brought the two of them back? Thor, who was wearing his armor, sat at the head of the long table and looked helplessly at Rog and Vigdigny sitting in a row. Let me correct you. I didn't bring them back. I escorted them back to Asgard. They are now Asgard's captives. Escorting them back to Asgard is a very normal thing to do. Rog explained silently. Vigdigny and Vigdigny were also present. He couldn't tell Thor that the reason he brought them back was because the camp commanders were too weak. Imprisoning Vigdigny and Vigdigny in the camp was no different from letting them go. Although he asked Rog to solve the problem in Warnerheim, Thor didn't expect that after solving the problem in Warnerheim, Rog would bring back an even bigger problem to Asgard. Vigdigny and Vigdigny weren't ordinary people. Their mother was Gulwig, a powerful existence in Warner Protoss that was only slightly weaker than the sea god Njord. And this slight weakness wasn't just a slight weakness in terms of strength. If Warner Protoss wasn't a typical patriarchal society, the one sitting on the throne right now might not be the sea god Njord. Forget it. Since it's already like this, I'll let them stay in Asgard for a while. After saying that, Thor picked up a golden bell beside the table and shook it gently. As the bell rang, the closed door was pushed open by the royal guards. 2 royal guards wearing golden armor walked in. Take them to see Sif. Thor gave a simple order to the guards who came in. As a superior, he didn't need to give too many orders. The specific arrangements would naturally be handled by others. All he had to do was give out orders. After the guards led Vigdigny and Roland away, Thor continued to question Rog. How did you come up with the idea of bringing them back as captives? I thought you were just going to go on a killing spree, and then simply deal with the Warner Protoss provocation. They surrendered. Rog explained briefly. However, after seeing Thor's dissatisfied expression, he roughly explained what had happened. When he defeated Vigdigny with his unconscious battle instincts, the 2 sisters immediately chose to surrender. At that time, the problem in front of him changed from defeating the army of Warner Protoss to how to deal with the tens of thousands of surrendered soldiers. After a minute of serious consideration, he decided to be a friendly pacifist. He let go of this army that was basically undamaged. Then, he took away the 2 main generals of the army. Although there were tens of thousands of people on one side and only 2 on the other, he was still clear on which was more important. As long as Vigdigny and Roland were still in Asgard's hands, the Warner Protoss wouldn't dare to act rashly. Unlike Njord, who had many descendants, Gulwig only had 2 daughters, Vigtigny and Weigelf. Therefore, even if some Warner Protoss had thoughts that they shouldn't have, Gulwig would make them completely calm down. After explaining to Thor what had happened and the situation of the 3 attacked camps, Rog left the meeting hall and returned to the room he had been staying in. The small episode in Warnerheim was over, so the only thing left was the matter of the goddess of death, Hel. He couldn't help much in the search for Hel's whereabouts for the time being. Therefore, before Hel's whereabouts were discovered, he would have a little leisure time. As for how long this leisure time would be, it would depend on how capable Heimdall, the guardian of Bifrost, and Asgard's intelligence personnel were. Time passed in the blink of an eye, and Rog had unknowingly stayed in Asgard for an entire week. Thor mobilized all of Asgard's intelligence forces, but in the past week, they had found nothing. Not only that, Odin's situation was getting worse and worse, and his divine power was collapsing to the point where he couldn't maintain his form. The news of Odin's impending death couldn't be hidden in the end. At the same time, the news of the goddess of death, Hel, was leaked by someone, causing the entire Asgard to be filled with the aura of a storm. Even Tani, a tourist who had just arrived at Asgard for a few days, noticed this unusual atmosphere. Normally, even if Odin was about to die, Asgard wouldn't be in such a state of panic. The old king had left, and the new king had ascended to the throne. This wasn't the first time in Asgard's history that something like this had happened. However, the appearance of the goddess of death, Hel, made the originally normal process become abnormal. Hel was the eldest princess of Asgard, although Odin tried his best to hide her existence. However, what had happened in the past wouldn't disappear completely just because it was hidden. Hel had once conquered the 9 realms with Odin, and was imprisoned by Odin because of her ambition. All kinds of hidden past were dug up one by one. Even the fact that Hel was the former owner of Thor's hammer, that the name of the weapon was Sword of the Night Sky, and that she had a giant wolf mount named Fenrir were spread out. After knowing that these news suddenly spread outside, Rog first suspected Loki. However, it turned out that this matter had nothing to do with Loki at all. After careful investigation, they found that the news originally came from Jotunheim, the kingdom of the frost giants, and Muspelheim, the kingdom of the flame giants. Like Warner Protoss, after knowing that Odin was about to die, these frost giants and flame giants became a little restless. Although the news was leaked by the frost giants and flame giants, they didn't take the initiative to start a war like Warner Protoss. Instead, they stayed in their homes. At least on the surface, that was the case. Golden Palace, in the banquet hall. I've seen the design of the destroyer's armor. The operating principle is very unscientific, and there are also many problems with the performance design. Tani took a sip of Asgard's unique liquor and said with disdain. The destroyer's armor uses magic and divine power, not science. You can't look at this armor with the scientific and technological eyes of Earth. Thor swallowed the barbecue in his mouth and answered silently. After hearing the conversation between Thor and Tani, Rog and Loki shook their heads helplessly. Since 3 days ago, Thor and Tani had similar conversations every night at dinner. The reason for these conversations was because of a commission from Thor. After knowing that Hel was the former owner of Thor's hammer, Thor found Tani, who was traveling in Asgard, and asked Tani to help him build new weapons and armor at the cost of fulfilling Tani's wish of interstellar travel. Chapter 444. Rog was not surprised that Thor had entrusted Tani to create new weapons and armor. To a certain extent, he even understood Thor very well. Although Thor had been very calm after knowing that the goddess of death Hel was the previous owner of Thor's hammer, as if he did not take this matter to heart at all. However, Rog knew that his mentality was starting to become unstable. As for the reason, it was very simple. In Thor's heart, Thor's hammer was the ultimate weapon that was tailor-made for him. It was his soul mate, his most reliable and trustworthy friend. Until now, Thor could still clearly remember what Odin had said in the Golden Palace during the ceremony when he almost inherited the throne. The Mjolnir is forged from the core of a dying star. Its divine power is incomparable. It can become a sharp weapon that can destroy the heavens and extinguish the earth. It can also become a divine work of art that can split the heavens and earth. It is the best thing for a king to have. Although his inheritance ceremony had ended because of the invasion of the frost giants, he had never forgotten this sentence. Therefore, in his opinion, Thor's hammer was not only a weapon that Odin had prepared for the next king but also a test that Odin had for the next king. Whoever could lift Thor's hammer would become the king of Asgard. Note 2, Odin was the king of Asgard, so Odin could lift Thor's hammer. Other than Odin, he was the only one who could lift Thor's hammer, so he was the most suitable person to become the king of Asgard. Although Rog had barely moved Thor's hammer in front of him once, he did not think that it was lifting, so he directly eliminated Rog. However, Hel was different from Rog. Firstly, Hela was Odin's eldest daughter and a member of the royal family of Asgard. Secondly, Hel was the former owner of Thor's hammer. In the end, Hela and Odin created Asgard's glory together, conquering the 9 worlds and making Asgard a powerful existence famous throughout the universe. Be it in terms of status, strength, or battle record, Hela was superior to him. What was even more troublesome was that when the news of Hela spread, many people started to discuss whether Hela was more qualified to inherit the throne. Furthermore, there were quite a lot of people talking about it, and there was no lack of people who supported Hela. Of course, these were not the main reasons why Thor asked Tani to forge new weapons and armor for him. According to Thor's performance in the past few days, Rog speculated that the main reason why Thor asked Tani to forge new weapons and armors was that Thor was jealous. The current Thor was a bit like suddenly finding out that his girlfriend had an ex that he had never known before. Not only that, this ex was taller, more handsome, richer, and more talented than him. It could be said that he crushed him in all aspects. Furthermore, this ex that he had never known before had taken the initiative to come knocking on his door. No matter which world a man was from, he would have a strong desire to possess the things he liked. This desire to possess was an instinct that was deeply imprinted in a man's DNA. It was an existence that transcended rationality. When they were young, this desire was reflected in the monopolization of toys. When they grew up, this desire was reflected in the desire for money and power. At this moment, Thor was deeply provoked by the ex of Thor's hammer, Hela. He would not give Thor's hammer to Hela, nor would he give Asgard to Hela, nor would he give Loki to Hela. Therefore, he had to do everything he could to increase his strength. For example, let Tani create powerful weapons and armor that Hela had never seen before. As the first princess of Asgard and a former criminal official, Hela's understanding of dwarven weapons was not inferior to his, and might even be better than his. This was also why he did not go to the dwarf king Aitsue but went to Tani instead. After all, before he was born, Hela had already completed the honor of conquering the 9 realms with Odin. While trying his best to increase his own strength, Thor did not forget to strengthen his teammates. He picked out a few magic letters from the top secret library that only the king was qualified to enter and handed them to Loki, who was more like an assassin than a mage. At the same time, he also handed the corpse of the giant wolf Fenrir to Rog. As for why Rog made this request, he did not ask too much. After dinner, Rog did not participate in the discussion between Thor and Tani about the new weapons and armor. Instead, he went directly to the laboratory that Thor had specially arranged for him. In this laboratory of nearly 500 square meters, there were all kinds of Asgard's research instruments. In the corner of the laboratory, there was also a heavy ancient wooden desk. On the desk were magic books that were either opened or piled up together. In addition to these magic books, there was also a golden disc with a diameter of dozens of centimeters on the desk. In the center of the disc, there was a cluster of orange-yellow flames that seemed to never go out. The eternal fire. This cluster of flames, which was not much bigger than a palm, was the treasure that the flame giant Surtur was most proud of, the eternal fire that could increase his strength by a terrifying amount. This cluster of eternal fire was the deposit that Thor had paid to Rog in advance. If he could complete the task of defeating Hela together, then all the eternal fire in the palace's treasury would belong to him. Because there was only a small cluster, this eternal fire was not the most eye-catching existence in the laboratory. On the magic circle in the center of the laboratory, there was a huge corpse that was more than 10 meters in length. This was the corpse of the giant wolf Fenrir. Although it had been dead for more than 2,600 years, Fenrir's corpse was still generally intact. Only a little of its fur and flesh had disappeared. The goddess of death Hela was imprisoned in 639 BC. As her mount, even if Fenrir did not die in the same year, it would not have been too far apart. When Rog first saw Fenrir in the underground secret room of the Golden Palace Hall, he knew that this was the psychic beast that he had been looking for a long time. Although he had used the Punisher and Abomination as psychic beasts for a period of time, they were not real beasts after all, and it was inevitable that they did not live up to their names. However, Fenrir perfectly met his requirements for a psychic beast. After getting Fenrir's corpse, he began to study how to resurrect Fenrir with the eternal fire. He did not intend to use the Edo Tensei on Fenrir because it would make the resurrected Fenrir no longer pure. Its fangs could bite through Hulk's skin. Its skin could resist the continuous fire of the spaceship's machine guns. What Rog wanted was the original Fenrir, not the modified Fenrir. Chapter 445. Resurrecting a creature that had been dead for more than 2,000 years was not an easy task. Even in a world with magic, this wasn't something that anyone could do easily. In the exchange page of the system, there were several ninjutsu related to resurrection. For example, Edo Tensei, as well as reincarnation and reincarnation that required the caster's life as the price. Although Rog really wanted a real psychic beast, he was not crazy enough to use reincarnation and reincarnation to resurrect the giant wolf Fenrir. Since he did not intend to use ninjutsu, he naturally put his eyes on magic. Although he did not look like a mage usually, he had received orthodox Kamartaj magic education and was a real mage with the title of Ancient One's disciple. He did not know if there was any magic related to resurrection in Kamartaj's library, and he was not very interested. The reason was simple. He now had a resurrection method that had been successfully verified. The goddess of death, Hela, used the eternal fire and her own divine power to successfully resurrect the giant wolf Fenrir and her undead warriors. Although this scene could no longer be performed in this world, this did not prevent him from learning a little from Hela's method. He had the corpse of the giant wolf Fenrir. He also had the eternal fire. The only thing he lacked now was Hela's divine power of death. Rog did not intend to ask for Hela's help because this kind of request was destined to be fruitless. Compared to helping him, Hela would be more inclined to kill him directly. Therefore, from the beginning, he excluded Hela from the list of people to ask for help. Although Hela had the divine name of the goddess of death and had awakened the divine power of death. But in this world, other than her, there were other existences who had mastered the domain of death. For example, the Lord of Hell, Mephisto. Rog did not have the idea of asking Hela for help because he planned to directly seek Mephisto's help. No matter which angle he looked at it from, his plan seemed a little unreliable. But he was full of confidence in his plan. As someone who had fought with Mephisto in Hell and left Hell alive, he did not feel that his plan would be dangerous. They were all old friends, so Mephisto probably wouldn't mind doing him a small favor. After flipping through Asgard's books on necromancy and dark magic, he successfully found a magic ritual that pointed to the Lord of Hell, Mephisto. He had seen a lot of magic rituals like this in Kamartaj. However, most of Kamartaj's magic rituals were directed at the Weshan Emperor, not an evil existence like Mephisto. It wasn't difficult to set up a magic ritual that pointed to Mephisto. According to the records, there were many mages who had set up a magic ritual and successfully contacted Mephisto. However, there were not many mages who could successfully obtain Mephisto's help. However, he was confident that he could move Mephisto. After checking the magic ritual that had already been set up, Rog guided the eternal fire on the golden disc to his left hand. Then, he came to Fenrir's body. After taking a deep breath for a few seconds, he raised his right hand and summoned the hellfire that he had plundered from Ghost Rider Johnny. When the orange-red hellfire completely enveloped his right hand, he did not hesitate as he slammed his right hand on the floor of the laboratory and used the hellfire to activate the magic ritual. Activating a magic ritual did not necessarily require the use of hellfire. Other types of energy could be used as well. However, in order to attract Mephisto's attention faster, he chose to use the hellfire to activate the magic ritual. When the hellfire flowed across the ground and ignited the magic array carved on the ground, a temporary spatial passage connecting to hell was constructed. This temporary spatial passage was different from Ghost Rider Johnny's Hellfire Gate. It could not allow creatures on both sides to pass through freely, and could only barely transmit consciousness and energy. When the spatial passage was completely stabilized, the hellfire burning on the magic array slowly floated into the air and condensed into a demon's head with curved horns. It really is you? Before Rog could say anything, this demon's head formed by the hellfire and larger than his body took the initiative to speak. Mephisto. Although the voice was different from what he remembered, he knew that it was Mephisto himself. That's right, it's me. It's been a long time. Rog replied calmly. I don't think you contacted me just to meet me. Cut the crap and get straight to the point. What exactly do you want from me? Mephisto did not intend to continue chatting with Rog, and asked directly. Of course, if the magic ritual set up by Rog could last longer, he would not mind chatting with Rog about his wonderful past experiences. It's very simple. I hope you can do me a small favor and add some death and resurrection power to the eternal fire in my hands. I want to resurrect this fellow in front of me. Rog did not waste any time and directly stated his request. So you want to resurrect Fenrir? With the eternal fire, resurrecting Fenrir is indeed not difficult. But why should I help you? You rejected my good intentions the last time. Mephisto was still brooding over Rog's refusal to become his subordinate. Don't be so petty. No matter what, you're a lord of hell. There's no need to make things difficult for a small fry like me. Rog replied nonchalantly, and did not look like he was asking for help at all. Although he did need Mephisto's help now, he did not feel that he needed to act like a beggar. And strictly speaking, he was not here to ask for help, but to make a deal. There's no custom of helping others for free in hell. Show me your sincerity, and I might consider it. Mephisto said in a tone that said, you know everything. Don't you just want a reward? No problem. Within 10 years, I'll take the initiative to go to hell once and spar with you again. How about this reward? Are you interested? Ever since the last time they fought, Rog knew that this old pervert Mephisto had his eyes on his soul. However, as long as he did not take the initiative to go to hell, Mephisto could not do anything to him. Therefore, he intended to give Mephisto a chance to obtain his soul. Of course, going to hell did not mean that he would definitely hand over his soul. If he wanted to obtain his soul, he would need to have some real ability. Deal. Rog had just finished speaking when Mephisto agreed. At the same time, an ancient sheepskin scroll flew out of the skull formed by hellfire. Sign it, and I'll help you resurrect Fenrir. Chapter 446. The brownish-yellow ancient sheepskin scroll slowly floated in front of Rog and unfolded on its own, displaying the contents of the contract in front of him. The contents of the contract were basically the same as the remuneration he had mentioned earlier, written in English that he was familiar with. From the content, there was nothing wrong with the contract at all. There were no misleading words, nor were there any loopholes in the grammar. However, after reading the contents of the contract, Rog sighed helplessly. Although Mephisto seemed very easy to talk to now, he was ultimately a cunning demon who liked to hide loopholes in contracts. I say, can there be any trust between humans and demons? Rog raised his head and looked at the demon's head floating in the air with dissatisfaction. What do you mean by this? The contents of the contract were written according to the remuneration you mentioned. Are you going back on your word? Although the demon's head formed by hellfire was only a projection, it displayed an extremely realistic expression, just like Mephisto himself. Although I've only been to hell once, and rarely interacted with you demons from hell, you can't treat me like an idiot. If I'm not wrong, these decorative patterns on the scroll should be some kind of hell's language. At first glance, there was indeed nothing wrong with the contents of the sheepskin scroll. However, the real contents of the contract were not just what he had said. Those patterns and lines that looked like they were just used to beautify the scroll were also a part of the contract. As expected of the man I've taken a liking to, you're indeed cautious, Mephisto said in an appreciative tone. After that, the patterns and lines on the scroll completely disappeared, leaving only the English parts that Rog could understand. You should be able to relax now, right? No, I'm still worried. Supercilious Eye, activate. Rog ignored Mephisto's gaze and directly activated Supercilious Eye. Using Supercilious Eye's supervision, he scanned the sheepskin scroll with extreme seriousness. There were no words that could not be seen with the naked eye. There were no energy-based languages or spells. There were no hidden traps or structures. Rog carefully observed every part and corner of the sheepskin scroll as if he was disarming a bomb. Indeed, there's no problem. After confirming that there was nothing wrong with the scroll, he closed Byakugan, raised his right hand and condensed chakra on his index finger. No matter what method was used to sign the name on the scroll, it would not affect the effect of the contract. Ink could do it, blood could do it, and so could chakra. Just as Rog's index finger was about to touch the parchment, he suddenly stopped and said quietly, I'm still a little worried. What are you worried about again? Mephisto's tone became a little displeased. Although the contract clearly states that as long as you resurrect Fenrir, I have to go to hell once within 10 years. However, resurrection for 1 second is still resurrection. That's why I think we need to discuss the time frame for Fenrir's revival. Rog said with a serious face, as if he was really considering this question. For the first time, Mephisto realized that Rog wasn't as good as he had imagined. At least, he was more talkative and neurotic than he had imagined. Suppressing the anger in his heart, Mephisto changed the contents of the contract again. The other terms were unchanged, but there was an additional sentence after the sentence about resurrecting Fenrir. Resurrect Fenrir and guarantee that Fenrir would have a natural lifespan of more than 100 years. 100 years of natural lifespan. Can I sign it now? No problem. Thank you for your generosity. Rog thanked him sincerely, raised his right hand again, and condensed chakra on his index finger. However, just as his finger was about to touch the parchment, he stopped again. What's wrong with you again? Although Mephisto's tried his best to control his tone, the demon head floating in the air clearly displayed his dissatisfaction. Well, I thought about it again just now. You're a lord of hell. Logically speaking, I shouldn't doubt your ability. But Fenrir is a special life form after all. It's a little different from humans. So, before signing the contract, can you prove a little that you do have the ability to resurrect Fenrir? Of course, this doesn't require you to really resurrect Fenrir. I just want to confirm that you really have the authority related to death. If you don't mind, you can first add some death domain energy to the eternal fire to prove that you do have the ability to fulfill the contract. He raised his left hand, and displayed the eternal fire in front of Mephisto's. That's right, said Rog sincerely as he raised his left hand, and displayed the eternal fire in front of Mephisto's. Mephisto didn't expect Rog to be worried about this. To an archdevil of Bator, this was a humiliation. Isn't it just a stronger beast? As long as I want to, I can make this beast jump around at any time. Mephisto didn't say anything. He used his actions to prove his thoughts. The demon head floating in the air opened its mouth, an array of green energy flew out and into the eternal fire. With the entry of this green energy, the golden eternal fire suddenly changed color, turning into a strange green. Boy, do you see that? This is the death energy you want, the death energy that can awaken the dead. After the eternal fire had completely changed its color, Mephisto spoke again. There was a hint of disdain in his tone. So this is the death energy, as expected of a lord of hell. Rog exclaimed after sensing the eternity fire that was now completely different from before. Since you have proven your ability, then I will also prove my sincerity. As soon as his voice fell, Rog raised his right hand for the third time. Then, he grabbed the parchment and rolled it up. Next, he threw the contract that he hadn't had time to sign into the summon scroll. You are deceiving me. After seeing Rog's actions, Mephisto finally reacted and roared angrily. Don't say it so harshly, I don't intend to deceive you. I am a ninja with good professional ethics and morals. I will fulfill the agreement, but not by signing a contract with you. Wait patiently, within 10 years, I will definitely go to hell to find you. After saying that, a burst of chakra erupted from Rog's body, completely destroying the magic formation on the ground. Very good. Ha 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 ha. As expected of the person I chose. How dare you? Before Mephisto could finish speaking, the demon head made of hellfire shattered with a bang, and disappeared into the air like fireworks. Chapter 447. As an honest, optimistic, dedicated, friendly, and civilized ninja. Unless his brain was eaten by zombies, he would never sign a contract with Mephisto. Previously, there was a young man who was ignorant of the world who signed a contract with Mephisto, and now his father's grave was several meters tall. Although what he did just now was not honorable and was slightly despicable. Not only did he not have any psychological burden, but he was also secretly happy. That was the Lord of Hell, Mephisto. For such an existence, not talking about martial virtues was the best martial virtue. After calming down the little excitement in his heart, Rog looked at the green eternal fire. Fenrir's corpse, the eternal fire that fused with the power of death. All the prerequisites for resurrection were met. Without hesitation, Rog came to Fenrir's huge head and pressed his left hand, which was wrapped in the green eternal fire, on Fenrir's head. Just like controlling chakra, he let the eternal fire in his left hand surge into Fenrir's head. When the dark green eternal fire entered Fenrir's head, a dark green light appeared in its empty eye sockets. After doing all this, Rog silently took a few steps back. The eternal fire that contained the power of death quickly flowed through Fenrir's body, awakening this terrifying beast that had been dead for more than 2,000 years. The rotten skin quickly recovered, and the black hair that had disappeared grew back. In just a few seconds, Fenrir, who had accompanied Hela to conquer one world after another, woke up. A monster that shook the earth. Note 1, the brutal demon wolf Fenrir was resurrected. When Fenrir stood up again, Rog finally saw its full appearance. It had green eyes, pitch-black fur, and a huge body that was more than 10 meters long. The more he looked, the more he felt that his decision to resurrect Fenrir was correct. Only an existence of Fenrir's level was qualified to be his psychic beast and mount. When Rog was looking at Fenrir, Fenrir's green eyes were also looking at Rog. Although Fenrir was a magical beast, its intelligence was not low. The moment it saw Rog, it was certain that this person had nothing to do with its master, Hela. Not only did he have nothing to do with Hela, but he was also not from Asgard but Midgardian. Other than the Asgard people, all other humans could be used as food. That was what Hell had taught it. Therefore, based on its past experience, it raised its right claw and swatted Rog like a fly. However, Fenrir soon discovered that Rog was completely different from the Midgardians in its memory. Before its sharp and huge right claw could land, Rog jumped onto its body and shone with a brilliant light. Before Fenrir could react, it had disappeared with Rog. Before reviving Fenrir, Rog had considered various possible scenarios. For example, the resurrected Fenrir treated him as food or an enemy. He was prepared for this and found a forest far away from the Golden Palace and the town. As for what this forest was called, he didn't know and wasn't interested. Because he would only come to this forest once and only once. After using quantum teleportation to bring Fenrir to the center of the forest, Rog directly left Fenrir's back. Then, he used the special ninjutsu to train psychic beasts. Mokuton Jutsu. Mokuton, Wood Dragon Jutsu. Fenrir, who stood up, was 4 or 5 meters tall. Its body and tail were nearly 15 meters. It was an out-and-out giant wolf. However, the wooden Arhat and the wooden dragon that Rog summoned at this time had a huge body size of more than 30 meters. Many times, a huge body meant a strong persuasive power. And Rog intended to prove this point again with facts. Arhat and the long hook-nosed wooden dragon surrounded Fenrir one after another. In Fenrir's puzzled eyes, Arhat and the long hook-nosed wooden dragon became the best dog trainers, using practical actions to prove what the most effective way to train a dog was. In the days when Hela conquered the 9 lands, Fenrir was a terrifying demonic beast that made countless enemies tremble in fear. It was synonymous with brutality and blood. But now, times had changed. Not long after, Rog, who was sitting on a branch, heard the miserable howling of wolves. As time passed, the howling of wolves not only did not stop but became more intense. Under the silent night sky, waves after waves of mournful wolf howls rang out, adding some extra feeling to the dark night. Rog knew that Fenrir had a certain wisdom, but he didn't intend to talk to Fenrir. He didn't even tell Fenrir why he let Arhat and the wooden dragon train it. From the moonlight to the scorching sun in the sky, the tireless wooden dragon Arhat and the wooden dragon worked together to train Fenrir for more than 10 hours before they finally stopped the training process that would be strongly condemned by wolf lovers. Fenrir was indeed a very powerful demonic beast, an existence that could play a wild battle face-to-face with Hulk. However, even Hulk couldn't withstand the combined training of more than 30 meters of wooden Arhat and the wooden dragon. When Fenrir stuck out its long tongue and lay motionless on the ground breathing heavily, Rog came to it again. Your master, Hela, is still alive, but you have no chance to return to her side. You have 2 choices now. The first is to refuse to be my psychic beast, and then be beaten to death by the 2 of them, a very cruel kind of death. At this point, Rog raised his finger and pointed at the wooden dragon and wooden Arhat. Then, he continued, the second choice is to become my psychic beast, and follow me in the future. If there is a chance, I will try my best to find a suitable female wolf for you, so that you can start a family and pass on the bloodline. Of course, this kind of thing depends on your fate. If the heavens destined you to be a single dog in this life, then don't resist, just obediently accept your fate. Glancing at Fenrir's intensely undulating abdomen, Rog took out the blood contract scroll that he had only used once from the psychic scroll. Different from the psychic scroll that was only 20 centimeters wide, the blood contract scroll was nearly half a meter wide, enough to put down Fenrir's claws. After the psychic blood contract scroll, Rog opened the scroll and put it in front of Fenrir. You don't have to worry about being lonely after becoming my psychic beast. Do you see this green signature? He is my first psychic beast. It doesn't matter if you don't know how to write a name, just get some of your blood and put a claw print on it. I won't mind. Okay, you now have 10 seconds to consider. If you don't mind, I can start the countdown now. 10, 3, 2. When it heard that it had 10 seconds to consider, Fenrir really wanted to think seriously. However, it didn't expect that Rog's countdown was different from what it imagined. 1. Just when it was shocked by Rog's unexpected card, Rog ended the final countdown. Fenrir, who was half dead, couldn't help but widen its green eyes when it heard Rog say, 1. It looked at Rog in disbelief. Then, it looked up at wooden Arhat and the long hook-nosed wooden dragon. What a pity, I thought you would be happy to become my psychic beast. While speaking, Rog shook his head regretfully, then reached out to the blood contract scroll on the ground. Chapter 448. Just when Rog's right hand was about to touch the blood contract scroll on the ground, Fenrir made a move that even it didn't expect. Fenrir, who was lying on the ground, raised its head slightly, then it stuck out its long red tongue and licked Rog's right hand. From the perspective of Fenrir's own intention, it actually didn't want to lick Rog's right hand. What it wanted was to prevent Rog from taking back the blood contract scroll. Fenrir's tongue was indeed very flexible, but for Rog, it was still too slow. He casually stepped sideways, easily avoided Fenrir's tongue, and took the blood contract scroll on the ground. Woo woo. Woo woo woo. After seeing Rog put away the blood contract scroll, Fenrir didn't hesitate and immediately made a fawning whining sound. Its pair of green eyes looked at Rog pitifully. The so-called demonic wolf dignity was now completely thrown to the back of Fenrir's head. Compared to the untouchable dignity, it valued its own life more. Moreover, it was full of interest to Rog's proposal to find a suitable female wolf. After experiencing death, this brutal demonic wolf that was once the nightmare of countless enemies had a deeper understanding of the preciousness of life. At the same time, it finally understood why its demonic wolves with low intelligence were keen to do some meaningless exercises that wasted physical strength with little female wolves after adulthood. Looking at Fenrir, who had begun to develop into a qualified pet dog, Rog nodded with satisfaction. Not bad, very energetic, a demonic wolf worth training. After sizing up Fenrir with satisfaction, Log put the blood contract scroll back on the ground and said with satisfaction, "Seeing that you've come to your senses in time, I'll give you one more chance." Last chance. This time, Rog didn't count down. When he finished, Fenrir didn't hesitate and immediately used its sharp wolf claws to cut its skin, staining its right claw with green blood. Then, in the blank area of the blood contract scroll, pressed its paw print. "From now on, you're my wolf. In the future, whoever I ask you to bite, you will rush up and bite, even if it's your former master, Hela. Of course, if you encounter any trouble in the future, I will cover you and never let others bully you. As for the other psychic beast benefits, I'll tell you slowly later." Opening the system's attribute panel, Rog glanced at the psychic beast column. Psychic beast, Punisher Frank, Edo 2 Reincarnation, Abomination Bronsky, Giant Wolf Fenrir. The Punisher was the only one among the 3 summoned beasts that didn't have a blood contract. Since it was summoned by the Eddy Earth, it was naturally a summoned beast, so there was no need for it to sign a blood contract. As for Abomination and Fenrir, they had both been trained and voluntarily signed the blood contract scroll, thus becoming Log's psychic beasts. You can rest here for a while to recover. You can go and grab whatever you want to eat. Of course, humans. When I need you, I'll find you again. You can now enjoy your new wolf life." After that, Rog threw the blood contract scroll back into the psychic scroll, then opened the portal back to the laboratory. After coming out of the portal that was shining with golden sparks, he glanced at the slightly empty laboratory. In addition to Fenrir, he actually had another psychic beast that he wanted. Devourer. One of the most terrifying creatures in the universe. Its stomach was connected to a parallel universe, and it could devour almost everything. After he crippled Falkor, he had asked Konoha's intelligence department to look for information about the devouring soul beast. He hoped that he could capture this orange cat that would never get fat from eating. But unfortunately, until now, he didn't get any information about Devourer. If he could turn Fenrir and the flapping Yuan beast into his own psychic beasts, then he would be considered a winner in life with both a cat and a dog. After a little fantasy in his mind, he left the laboratory, found the guard station near the laboratory, and asked them to send the magic books in the laboratory back to the Golden Palace Library. Those magic books were the collection of the Golden Palace. After reading them, of course, they had to be returned to the original owner. After instructing the guards, he happily walked toward Tawny's laboratory. Resurrecting Fenrir was his pre-war preparation plan. After completing his plan smoothly, he couldn't help but be curious about Tawny's progress. Although most of the Iron Man armors made by Tawny were products of technology, in Rog's memory, Tawny also made several sets of magic armors. Kami Assembly Armor, Sword in the Stone Armor, God Slayer Armor, Supreme Warlock Armor. However, Rog only saw these armors in manga. As for whether Tawny in this world could still make these armors, he wasn't sure. It didn't take long for him to come to the laboratory that Thor specially prepared for Tawny and saw Tawny, who was designing a new type of armor. "Why are you here? Did your wolf cub come back to life?" Tony, who was sitting on the high back chair, raised his head and glanced at Roger before returning his gaze back to the table. Rog didn't hide his plan to resurrect Fenrir, and there was no way to hide this kind of thing. Yes, it came back to life and volunteered to join us, intending to fight against its evil former owner with us. I didn't expect you to really do it, you are really a madman. Tani stopped calculating data with his right hand and sighed. It's okay, it's not particularly crazy. As he spoke, Rog's eyes involuntarily fell on the destroyer armor that had been beaten into scrap iron by the wooden man. Looking at the once majestic destroyer armor now piled up in the corner like scrap metal, he couldn't help but miss the scene of the first time he used the wooden arhut to perform the Gatling fist technique. After silently sighing in his heart, he picked up an armor design drawing on the table. This is an armor drawing that has been completed. The shape of the new armor is more than 80% similar to the destroyer armor. The rest of the design incorporates Tani's design concept. In short, the new armor that Tani designed for Thor is a bit like the destroyer armor that incorporates the style of Tani's Iron Man armor. This image looks a bit familiar. As soon as he saw the design of the new armor, Rog felt that he had seen something similar to it somewhere before. This is the anti-Thor armor. After carefully thinking about it, he finally remembered where he had seen this armor before. The new armor that Tani built for Thor turned out to be the anti-Thor armor that he had seen in manga. Thor's new armor is actually the anti-Thor armor, and he began to be a little confused. Chapter 449. What's the name of this armor? Rog put down the blueprint in his hand and could not help but ask. It's not confirmed yet. Anti-Hela armor or anti-death armor. It doesn't matter what it's called. Tani did not look up and continued to calculate the data. Luckily, it's not called anti-Thor armor. Otherwise, Thor would definitely suspect that you're on Hela's side. Rog complained in his heart. What about the weapon? What new weapon did you design for Thor? Rog continued to ask. It's still a hammer, a bigger hammer. With that, Tani found the blueprint of a new weapon from a pile of blueprints and handed it to Rog. Just as Tani said, the new weapon was a hammer. However, compared to Thor's hammer, the new hammer designed by Tani was much bigger. How big was it? Rog looked at the standard numbers on it. The hammer was 1.2 meters long, 45 centimeters wide, and 60 centimeters tall. From the looks of it, the new hammer designed by Tani was a super-enlarged version of Thor's hammer, directly using the design style of Thor's hammer. Have you shown the blueprint of this hammer to Thor? Although Thor loved hammers and even had the funny nickname of the Hammer God, it was still not enough. Rog still felt that the new hammer designed by Tani was a little too big. I've seen it, and he likes it a lot. Alright, you win. Big hammer 80, small hammer 40. This sentence appeared in his mind involuntarily. After imagining the scene of Thor fighting with two hammers, one big and one small, Rog tactfully shut his mouth. Then, he left Tani's laboratory and decided to return to his room to have a good sleep. Controlling the wooden arhut and the long beak-nosed wooden dragon for more than 10 hours wasn't enough to exhaust his chakra, but it was still very tiring. Under the service of the maids of the Golden Palace, he enjoyed a relaxing bath service that made him feel both physically and mentally comfortable. This damned feudal society degenerate life. A week later, in the conference hall of the Golden Palace. This is a letter of challenge from Hela. With that, Thor, who was sitting at the head of the table, passed Hela's letter of challenge to Rog, who was sitting at the head of the table. After receiving the letter of challenge, Rog casually glanced at it. The content was very simple. There was only one sentence. 3 days later, in Jotunheim, the two armies will face off. The goddess of death did not plan to sneak back to Asgard. Instead, she openly issued a challenge and set a date for the final battle. It had to be said that Hela's method was very domineering. Although her strength would increase significantly after she stepped onto Asgard, she was still a little weak. However, she did not do so. Instead, she directly challenged Thor and Asgard. What I lost, I will take back with my own hands. This might be Hela's true thoughts at this time. A battle between the two armies? She has organized another undead army? Rog said in confusion while looking at Heimdall on the left side of the long table. Hela doesn't only have an undead army now. She also has an entire frost giant army. She is now the Queen of Jotunheim. At this point, Heimdall lowered his head in shame. He was the guardian of Bifrost and had the eye of the god that could perceive everything. He was the main force in searching for Hela's whereabouts. However, just as he was searching for Hela all over the world, Hela actually became the Queen of Jotunheim right under his nose. To him, this was undoubtedly a slap to his face. If Hela had not taken the initiative to appear in Jotunheim and sent a frost giant to deliver the letter of challenge, he would not have known that Hela was in Jotunheim until now. Queen of Jotunheim? After hearing Heimdall's description, Tani, Loki, the three warriors of Sengoku, and Sif all looked puzzled. Tani was puzzled about what kind of place Jotunheim was. Sif and the others were puzzled about how Hela had subdued these frost giants. Although Loki had stabbed his biological father to death in the last royal family dispute and had almost destroyed Jotunheim with Bifrost, bringing a fatal blow to the frost giants like a world-ending natural disaster. However, Jotunheim was still a kingdom that belonged to the frost giants. It had only been half a month since Hela had broken out of her predicament. It only took half a month to take Jotunheim's frost giant under his command. This efficiency could be said to be terrifying. Even if Asgard mobilized all his troops, he would not be able to completely take down Jotunheim in half a month. However, Hela had done something that Asgard's army could not do by herself. Although the battle had not yet begun, Sif and the others could already feel the immense pressure brought by Hela. Compared to Sif and the others, Rog and Tani were much calmer. One of them felt that it was still within the acceptable range, while the other did not know what this meant at all, so they were extremely calm. What do you think of Hela's letter of challenge? Looking at Sif and the others, whose expressions were getting worse and worse, Thor spoke. I have an immature suggestion that everyone can consider. Rog glanced around and continued, although Hela has an undead army and a frost giant army, this is not particularly troublesome. As long as we aim the Bifrost at Jotunheim and launch at full power. When the time comes, not to mention destroying Hela's army, even destroying the entire Jotunheim won't be difficult. Thor and the others thought that Rog would have an exquisite plan, but they did not expect that Rog's suggestion was to directly destroy the entire Jotunheim. A full-power Bifrost could indeed completely destroy Jotunheim, but such an indiscriminate large-scale destructive attack had never been used even in the process of conquering the 9 worlds by Odin. This method had already gone beyond the scope of war and had risen to the level of genocide. The last person who had such an idea was Loki when his ambitions were inflated. While Thor and the others looked at Rog in disbelief, Loki showed an expression of approval to Rog. Without a word of disagreement, he would directly kill him. Loki liked this character very much. After looking at Rog silently for more than 10 seconds, Thor sighed helplessly, shook his head, and said, No. We can't do this. Even if we destroy Jotunheim, it won't cause much harm to Hela. With her strength, she can leave before Jotunheim is destroyed. In the end, Thor rejected Rog's suggestion. If we don't do this, then we can only sacrifice the lives of those ordinary soldiers. You and I can entangle Hela, but we can't deal with her army at the same time. You should know this very well. Although Rog's suggestion was crazy, it could prevent the deaths of ordinary soldiers to the greatest extent. Although using the Bifrost to attack Jotunheim was a very unfair thing for the frost giants still had the advantage. But war was never fair. Since they stood in the wrong position, of course they had to pay the corresponding price. No, Asgard won't do this, and Father won't want to see this. Thor did not want to sacrifice the lives of ordinary soldiers, but he still could not accept the suggestion of using Bifrost to launch an indiscriminate destructive attack. He knew that this was a very cruel thing for those ordinary soldiers. But for Asgard, he could only do this. Asgard must not be synonymous with tyrant and destruction, absolutely not. Chapter 450. Asgard, Golden Palace Hall. Thor was wearing a silver-white anti-Hera armor as he sat on the throne in the Golden Palace Hall with a serious expression. On the left and right of the throne, there were two warhammers, one big and one small. The small one was Thor's hammer. The big one was the new weapon that Tani had created for Thor, the Thunder Titan's hammer. On the stairs on the side of Thor's hammer stood the Rainbow Bridge Guardian Heimdall, Sif, and the three warriors of Sengoku. On the side of the Thunder Titan's hammer stood Loki, Rog, Tani, and Hulk. Hulk was not originally on the list, and Thor did not specifically summon Hulk. The reason why he was here was purely because of Little Pepper. 2 days ago, when Tani returned to Earth and planned to bring Mark 46 to Asgard, he was stopped by Little Pepper. Note 1, Little Pepper did not agree with Tani participating in the war between Asgard and Hela. According to Tani, he used a strong attitude to reject Little Pepper because he did not want to abandon Thor and Rog. However, Rog heard a completely different version from Hulk's mouth. Tani did not convince Little Pepper. In order to reassure Little Pepper, Tani took the initiative to ask Hulk to accompany him, and in the end, Little Pepper agreed. Thor warmly welcomed Hulk's arrival. Loki, on the other hand, had been appearing and disappearing unpredictably since the day Hulk arrived. If it was not for the fact that everyone had to gather before going to war, Rog felt that he might not even be able to see Loki today. Outside the stairs were the generals of Asgard's army. As for the ordinary soldiers, they gathered in the square outside the Golden Palace, ready to go to war at any time. Thor, who was sitting on the throne, glanced at the people in the Golden Palace with a dignified gaze, and said slowly in a serious tone like Odin, "Let's go." At the same time, a grand horn sounded outside the Golden Palace. As the horn sounded, Thor slowly stood up, holding Thor's hammer and Thunder Titan's hammer in his hands, and walked step by step toward the Rainbow Bridge. The Golden Palace was quite a distance away from the Rainbow Bridge, and as the commander-in-chief, Thor, of course, it was impossible to walk to the Rainbow Bridge. At the entrance of the palace hall, there was a handsome Pegasus with its white fur white snow. This Pegasus was called Sleipnir, and it was Odin's mount. Note 2, Thor preferred to fly over with Thor's hammer instead of riding Thor's hammer. However, as the commander-in-chief of the army and Asgard's regent, he couldn't do as he pleased in this regard, and could only lead the army according to tradition. When Thor rode the handsome Pegasus that originally belonged to Odin, except for Rog and Hulk, everyone else rode the Pegasus that had already been prepared and slowly walked toward the Rainbow Bridge Hall. Rog didn't ride a Pegasus because he had a better mount, Fenrir. Hulk didn't ride a Pegasus because he didn't know how to ride one at all, and those Pegasus were instinctively afraid of him. As long as Hulk touched these Pegasus would instantly go crazy, as if they had been touched by their natural enemy. Under the leadership of Thor, Asgard's army started from the Golden Palace Square and marched all the way to the Rainbow Bridge Hall. Then, like dumplings, they walked into the entrance of the Rainbow Bridge one batch after another. The Rainbow Bridge was worthy of being a strategic weapon of war. It only took a few seconds for Thor, Rog, and others to arrive at the bone-chilling Jotunheim. Behind them were teams of Asgard's army. Cold. Very cold. Extremely cold. Rog's first feeling when he came to Jotunheim was like wearing thin summer clothes to the South Pole in winter. The ubiquitous cold wind blew from all directions and quickly took away the body's temperature. Without any hesitation, Rog directly covered himself with a layer of light blue chakra coat to completely isolate himself from the cold wind. When the warmth returned to his body, Rog glanced at Hulk, who was only wearing a pair of thin elastic shorts. The cold that was fatal for ordinary people was nothing to Hulk, whose physical fitness was so good that it was a cheat. He even liked this rare cold weather a little. Although Tani, who was wearing Mark 46, did not have a strong physique, he did not need to worry about the temperature at all with the armor wrapped around him. As time passed, Asgard's army continued to appear behind them, forming a phalanx. Several hundred meters in front of them, there were two large armies. Dark blue skin and blood-red eyes were the Frost Giant army. The ones with dark skin and green eyes were Hela's undead army. It had to be said that Hela had chosen a good place. In a cold world like Jotunheim, every corpse could be properly preserved, unlike other worlds where only skeletons were left. When Asgard's army was completely assembled, Jotunheim's new queen, the goddess of death, Hela, rode a ferocious frost behemoth full of strong muscles to the front of the frost giant army and the undead army. She calmly looked at Asgard's army opposite her. However, in the next second, a trace of anger appeared on her face. Fenrir. Hela saw her old partner, Fenrir, and Rog, who was riding on Fenrir's back with a light blue glow all over his body. With just a glance, Hela saw the difference in Fenrir. The power of death. On Fenrir's body, she saw an extremely rich power of death. It only took a few seconds for Hela to recognize the source of this power of death and roughly speculate on Fenrir's state. Fenrir died and was resurrected by the power of death in hell. Although Hela had not been to hell, she was not unfamiliar with it. If she had not been imprisoned by Odin back then, she would have even led an army to hell and conquered the world that had never been conquered by anyone. Fenrir, come here. Hela ignored Thor, who was riding the eight-legged horse, Sleipnir, and said directly to Fenrir. The whistling cold wind not only did not cover Hela's voice, but it also clearly passed her voice into Fenrir's ears. Hearing Hela's call, Fenrir instinctively raised his right claw. However, just as his right claw was about to step forward, he suddenly realized something. He silently retracted his right claw, whined softly, and lowered his head. Although Rog did not understand what Fenrir was saying, he could understand Fenrir's meaning. My current master is Rog, and I will only listen to Rog's orders. Good attitude, I'm very satisfied. Rog patted Fenrir in a good mood. Chapter 451. Although Asgard was a universal civilization with a long history, Asgard's war culture was not much different from medieval Europe. To put it simply, both sides of the war would gather their respective armies, then choose a battlefield where no one had any objections, set up a formation, and finally, charge directly. Yes, Asgard's war culture was so simple, just like a street gang fight. The only difference was that the number of people fighting was a little more, the weapons were more powerful, and the individual combat power was a little stronger. When Fenrir refused Hela's summon, Thor, who was riding on the eight-legged Thor's hammer, directly raised the hammer of Thor in his right hand and summoned a huge lightning bolt that cut through the cold wind. Accompanied by the rumbling sound of thunder, Thor waved Thor's hammer and sword into the sky, flying straight toward Hela, who was on the frost behemoth. Without any orders, when Thor took the lead and flew toward the goddess of death, Asgard's army also rushed toward the frost giant army and the undead army on the opposite side like a torrent. Stupid. Looking at Thor, who was flying toward her like lightning, goddess of death Hela snorted disdainfully. Then, she slowly raised her right hand and gently waved it from left to right. The moment Hela waved her hand, black swords appeared out of thin air and flew toward Thor and the Asgard army behind him like a rainstorm. However, just as these black swords flew out, a Rasengan wrapped in lightning took the lead and flew into the frost giant's army. Raiton, spiral electromagnetic gun. Rog, who was riding on Fenrir's back, did not charge with Thor, but directly used ninjutsu. Since Thor didn't want Asgard to be known as bloody and cruel, then this bad name will be carried by me. Unlike Thor, Rog didn't care what others would think of him. Even on Earth, he dared to let Konoha maintain a strong and domineering style, and he didn't care what others would say about him and Konoha. Not to mention that he was now in an alien kingdom like Jotunheim, facing an alien race like the Frost Giants. Although the spiral electromagnetic cannon was not big, its speed and power were not small at all. Before the black sword that Hela shot out could reach Thor, the light blue spiral railgun had already landed in the middle of the Frost Giant army. Boom! A terrifying explosion that caused the earth to tremble resounded. A huge light blue ball of light soared into the sky, and a powerful energy storm and shockwaves swept out in all directions like a hurricane, instantly engulfing everything. The terrifying shockwave produced by the explosion blew away the raging cold wind, causing the harsh cold weather to temporarily disappear. No one thought that Rog's first shot would be a large-scale attack ninjutsu. However, what surprised them even more was what he did next. Before the explosion of the first spiral electromagnetic gun had dissipated, he threw out the second spiral electromagnetic gun. Then, the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth shots followed. Rog used the electromagnetic pulse gun 6 times before he ended the saturation attack. That's all I can do for you. Although Thor decided to follow the tradition of Asgard and use Asgard's army to face the frost giants and the undead army head-on. However, Rog was not willing to see these ordinary soldiers die in vain. The place where they were now was called Jotunheim, the place with the most frost giants in the universe. Coupled with the racial characteristics of the frost giants, the number of enemies facing Asgard's army was several times their own. For this decisive battle, Thor basically pulled out all of Asgard's main forces. But even so, Asgard's soldiers were less than 100,000. Opposite them were hundreds of thousands of frost giants and an even more astonishing undead army. He respected the tradition of Asgard, but he also hoped that more ordinary soldiers could return to Asgard alive. After all, during this time, Asgard had provided him with a meticulous feudal life. If you respect me, I will return the favor tenfold. The 6 spiral electromagnetic cannons were his return to this feudal and depraved life. The 6 powerful electromagnetic pulse gun shots not only disrupted the formation of the frost giants and the undead army, but also significantly reduced their advantage in numbers. As for the rest, of course, it was up to Asgard's soldiers to deal with. Moreover, when Asgard's soldiers and the frost giants fought, Rog could not continue to use these saturation attacks. Unless he wanted to take Asgard's ordinary soldiers with him. The goddess of death originally thought that she only needed to get rid of her brother Thor this time. However, it turned out that her thinking was a little too simple. If she wanted to return to Asgard's throne, defeating Thor was far from enough. At least in Hela's opinion, this guy called Rog was more troublesome than Thor. When subduing the frost giants, she did not forget to inquire about Asgard. She knew what Rog had done in Asgard in recent years, but what she did not expect was that Rog was stronger than the rumors said. Looking at the frost giants and the undead army scattered around, Hela put away her initial disdain and stroked her black hair with both hands. With a stroke of her hands, her long black hair disappeared. What replaced it was a black helmet with 10 sharp horns of different lengths. The goddess of death, Hela, had officially entered battle mode. As soon as Hela's black helmet appeared, Thor, who was holding 2 hammers, one big and one small, appeared in front of her. Then, he held the Thunder Titan's hammer in his left hand and smashed it at Hela. Thor did not leave and used Thor's hammer to attack Hela. This was because he knew that as the previous owner of Thor's hammer, Hela definitely had the ability to block Thor's hammer's attack. Facing Thor's Thunder Titan's hammer, Hela, who was sitting on the frost behemoth, did not dodge. She casually stretched out her right hand. The huge Thunder Titan's hammer fell with the power of thunder and smashed into Hela's right hand. Then, nothing happened. Thor's Thunder Titan's hammer was like a floating balloon, easily blocked by Hela and did not cause any damage to her. Not only that, when Thor tried to pull back the Thunder Titan's hammer, he suddenly realized that he could not. With Thor's hammer as a sample, the Thunder Titan's hammer, which Tawny had painstakingly created, seemed to be nailed to Hela's hand. No matter how hard Thor tried, the Thunder Titan's hammer did not move at all. Thor had seen this scene before when others tried to lift Thor's hammer. Kneel. Hela, who was holding the Thunder Titan's hammer, looked at Thor calmly and said like a queen. Chapter 452. When Hela said, "Kneel," with an expressionless face, Thor felt as if he was looking at a female version of Loki. Just as arrogant, just as insufferably arrogant. As the Thor of Asgard and the regent, of course, Thor would not choose to kneel. He raised Thor's hammer and summoned a huge bolt of lightning as thick as a bucket from the cloudy sky toward Hela. The bolt of lightning from the sky arrived before Hela at an unimaginable speed and accurately hit her body. Boom! The sound of a huge explosion rang out, and tiny electric snakes scattered like fireworks. He had succeeded. Saul's heart surged with joy. However, in the next second, the joy in his heart disappeared. What replaced it was shock and disbelief. The messy electric snakes quickly dissipated in the air, and Hela's figure appeared before him once again. Unharmed. Not only was Hela not injured as Thor had imagined, but even the frost behemoth under her was also unharmed. How is this possible? Although it was a last-minute move, Thor was very clear about the power of the lightning he summoned. Has Odin gone senile? To actually choose a weakling like you to inherit the throne. With Hela's strength, she could have dodged the lightning before it hit her. However, she did not do so because she wanted to see what kind of strength the heir that Odin had carefully cultivated had. She was very disappointed. Very disappointed. With the strength that Thor had shown so far, he was far from being able to compete with her before she was imprisoned, let alone the current her. Thinking of this, Hela's disdain for Thor became even more obvious. She had originally thought that the heir that Odin had carefully cultivated would be a top expert that could look down on the 9 worlds, but reality proved that she had thought too much. After personally experiencing Thor's attack, Hela did not intend to continue playing with Thor. She grabbed the Thunder Titan's hammer with her right hand and exerted force. Bang! The Thunder Titan's hammer, which was made of URU metal and other metals from the Divine Palace, shattered under Hela's grab, turning into pieces of scrap metal of different sizes. Shattering a hammer with her bare hands. Although Hela did not crush Thor's hammer this time but the Thunder Titan's hammer that Tani had created, the scene was still shocking. The most shocked one was Tani, who had personally created the Thunder Titan's hammer. He knew that Hela was very strong, or they would not have brought tens of thousands of troops here. However, he did not expect Hela was to be this strong. If even the Thunder Titan's hammer could not withstand a casual grab from Hela, then Mark 46 would definitely not be able to. It took less than a second for Tony to make the decision to stay away from hell. Saul's entire family was a monster. Of course, monsters could only be dealt with. Tani began to look for traces of the other monster, Rog. After using 6 spiral electromagnetic cannons, Rog used superlight rock to leave Fenrir's back, allowing Fenrir to freely attack the frost giants and the undead army. As for himself, he was floating above the battlefield, looking down at the battle between Thor and Hela. Hela was very strong, undeniably strong. Especially after witnessing Hela block the lightning with the divine power of death, he was even more certain. It was not difficult to use the divine power of death to protect oneself from lightning. As long as one was slightly proficient in energy control, they could do this. However, what Hela did was far more than that. Not only did Hela use the divine power of death to protect herself, but she also protected the frost giant under her and the surrounding ground. What was even rarer was that Hela controlled the output of the divine power of death to an extremely precise degree, making the divine power of death just enough to offset the power of the lightning, creating a scene as if nothing had happened. If one were to describe it in terms of figure, then one would be fat if one were to add a bit more, and one would be thin if one were to add a bit less. Perfect. Perfect in the truest sense. Although Rog's control of chakra could be considered exquisite, compared to Hela's control of the divine power of death, he was not just a little bit behind. As expected of the goddess of death who had once made Odin feel troubled. Just as Rog was admiring Hela's exquisite control, a black sword suddenly appeared in Hela's left hand, directly piercing toward Thor, who was still in a state of shock. Clang! The black sword that Hela casually summoned hit the anti-Hela armor on Thor's body, creating a crisp sound of collision. Different from the Thunder Titan's hammer, the anti-Hela armor did not disgrace Tani's reputation as a genius inventor, easily blocking Hela's sword. It was only when the tip of the black sword hit the anti-Hela armor on his body that Thor finally reacted, quickly waving Thor's hammer, increasing the distance between him and Hela. The image of Hela blocking the lightning without any injury and crushing the Thunder Titan with her bare hands brought immense pressure to Thor. At the same time, it also made him feel a little fortunate. Fortunately, it was the Thunder Titan's hammer that had smashed toward Hela in the beginning and not Thor's hammer, or he would have lost more than just a weapon. After Thor increased the distance between him and Hela, Rog, who was floating in the air, quickly flew to Thor's side. Your mind is a little unstable right now. Let me deal with her first, you go deal with the other enemies. If anyone else had said this to him at this time, Thor would definitely have rejected without even thinking. However, the person who said this to him was Rog. Be careful. She's very strong, much stronger than we thought. After giving Rog a reminder, Thor waved Thor's hammer and flew toward the area with the most frost giants. After Thor left, Rog took a deep breath and calmed his mind completely. 3 Tomo Sharingan, open. With the opening of the Sharingan, his aura also changed, becoming as sharp as the cold wind around him. Lightning body blink. Rog, who was glowing with a light blue light, instantly disappeared. Lightning body blink had already become a habit for him. No matter what kind of enemy he was facing, using lightning body blink to launch a surprise attack or test the waters was a good method. In just an instant, Rog appeared in front of Hela as if he had teleported. He jumped high into the air and slashed at Hela's neck with his Kusanagi sword. Clang! Hela, who was sitting on the frost behemoth, did not change her expression. She casually raised the black sword in her left hand and blocked the incoming Kusanagi sword. At the same time, she summoned a black sword with her empty right hand and stabbed it at Log, who was in midair. Chi! The black sword in Hela's right hand instantly pierced through Rog's body. Blue blood spurted out, and a 2-meter-tall frost giant painfully gripped the black sword that had pierced through his body. Substitution technique. Chapter 453. Rog had not used the substitution jutsu in a battle for a long time. As he mastered more and more ninjutsu, there were fewer and fewer battles where he needed to use the substitution jutsu. Even so, when he used this ninjutsu that he had not used for a long time, he did not feel unfamiliar with it. When the black sword in Hela's right hand stabbed towards him, he randomly picked a target from the frost giants around him and let this unlucky guy take the hit for him. In Naruto's world, the substitution jutsu was one of the 3 entry-level ninjutsu. Those who did not learn the substitution jutsu were not even qualified to graduate from the ninja academy. However, in this world, the substitution jutsu was definitely a godly technique for dodging attacks. Even if there was a limit to its range, it did not affect this point at all. Compared to when he first learned the substitution jutsu, Rog's range was now several times larger, enough to allow him to dodge most attacks except for large-scale ones. For example, at a time like this. When she blocked Rog's Kusanagi sword, Hela did not feel that there was anything praiseworthy about his attack this time. However, when Rog used the substitution jutsu that she had never seen before and could not even see through, Hela's expression appeared as if she had seen a new prey. In an instant, he replaced her position with the frost giants and let them take the hit that should have been taken by her. Interesting. Hela did not pay attention to the frost giants that were still struggling in pain. She released her right hand and directly abandoned the black sword. For Hela, this black sword was a consumable that she did not need to care about at all. However, when she released her right hand and threw away the black sword, Rog, who had disappeared, once again appeared in her sight. She saw him stepping on the frost giant's head, and when the frost giant fell due to gravity, he swung the Kusanagi sword that was wrapped in lightning. Lightning release, Chidori blade. After testing it out, he roughly understood the strength of the black sword. Since the Kusanagi sword under normal conditions could not cut through it, then he would try the more lethal and sharper Kusanagi sword, Chidori blade. While Hela had plenty of combat experience and exquisite techniques, she had never met an opponent like Rog, who did not play by the rules. Normal people would choose to pull away after their first attack failed and redeploy a second attack. However, Rog did not do so. Although he had used the substitution technique and let the unlucky frost giant take the blow for him, the frost giant's body was still very weak. However, he did not distance himself from them. Instead, he hid in the blind spot created by the frost giant and the frost behemoth. Because of the angle, Hela, who was sitting on the frost behemoth, did not notice his little action immediately. Instead, she thought that he had chosen to distance himself from her like everyone else. When Hela let go of her right hand and tried to find him, he instantly appeared above the falling frost giant from her blind spot. When she saw Rog stepping on the frost giant's head, Hila's right hand once again summoned the black sword, and the black sword in her left hand immediately attacked him. However, to Rog, Hila's movements were too slow. In this kind of high-speed close-range combat, even a delay of 0.01 seconds would cause irreparable consequences. The Kusanagi sword in Rog's hand drew a beautiful arc, and under Hila's gaze, he instantly appeared in front of her. Chi. The Kusanagi sword with lightning wrapped around it slashed through Hila, cutting off one of the sharp horns on her helmet. It was not that Rog did not want to directly cut off Hila's head, but he did not have such a chance. While the black swords in Hila's hands could not stop him in time, her strangely shaped black helmet with 10 sharp horns managed to block his unexpected attack. At the start, Rog was still curious as to why the goddess of death would choose such a strange helmet. Now, he knew. This black helmet was not only a decoration that made Hila look more domineering, but it was also a protective equipment with good defensive effects. At the very least, when Hila was wearing this helmet, Rog would definitely not choose to attack her head with his bare hands. Lightning blink. While the final result was a little different from what he had imagined, he did not hesitate and directly used lightning blink to leave the frost giant's head. When the frost giant with the black sword in its chest fell heavily in front of the frost behemoth, the black horn that was cut off by the Kusanagi sword, Thousand Birds' blade fell onto the frost behemoth's body, then bounced up slightly and fell onto the thick frozen ground. "You're good, at least much better than Thor." Looking at the black horn that had fallen to the ground, Hila's expression did not change as she spoke to Rog, who was dozens of meters away. Then, under Rog's gaze, Hila raised her right hand and gently touched the horn that had been cut off by Rog. When Hila's right hand touched the smooth surface of the cut, a ghostly green light lit up, and the black horn that had been cut off quickly returned to its original state. At the same time, the black horn on the ground turned into a bundle of black hair. "It's actually hair." Seeing this scene, Rog revealed a look of doubt. All this time, he had thought that Hila was wearing a strange helmet. However, now it seemed that it was not a helmet at all but hair that had been changed by the god of death. This way of using energy was very imaginative. Using energy to strengthen parts of the body was a relatively common and orthodox method. For example, Rog often used chakra to strengthen his body, giving him more strength and speed in battle. However, Hila's method was completely different. She used the god of death's power on her hair, turning it into a strange helmet. When the helmet that had turned into hair returned to its original state, Hila, who was holding 2 swords, jumped down from the frost behemoth and slowly walked toward Rog. When she was only 20 meters away from Rog, she stopped and said to Rog with the arrogance of a queen, "Submit and be loyal to me, and I will give you the position of Asgard's executioner." Although Hila's tone made people feel very unhappy, and her arrogant attitude was even more annoying than Loki before he was beaten up, for some reason, when these words came out of Hila's mouth, it made people feel as if it was natural. "Sorry, I have no intention of becoming someone else's subordinate." Rog did not hesitate and directly rejected Hila's suggestion. Then, she continued, "Also, you do not have the authority to appoint Asgard's executioner." Appointing an executioner was a power that only the king of Asgard had. Putting aside the fact that Hila did not have such authority, even the current soul did not have it. You're tuning in to the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.